My ex-husband, who thought I was infertile, left me 15 years ago. When he ran into me and saw my son, he trembled. That chance encounter was just the beginning of a tumultuous journey where old secrets resurface and hidden truths come to light, challenging everything he believed about the past, present, and future. Hey there, folks. I'm Linda, and welcome to Linda's Stories channel. I hope you're all ready for a good tale. So, picture this. It's a sunny afternoon, and there's Catherine sitting by herself at a restaurant table by the window. She's gazing outside, enjoying the lovely day, waiting for the waiter to bring her lunch. Little did she know, a surprising encounter was just around the corner. As Catherine headed to the bathroom, she accidentally bumped into a boy walking down the hallway. She said sorry right away, but when she glanced at the man with the boy, she was shocked to see someone from her past. It was Michel, Catherine's ex-husband, whom she hadn't seen in 15 years since they divorced. Feeling a bit surprised by the unexpected meeting, Catherine felt a mix of surprise and discomfort as he came closer. However, she stayed composed and greeted him politely. Michel and Catherine had always dreamed of having children. From the start of their marriage, they tried hard to make that dream come true, but it just didn't happen. Years passed, and they still couldn't conceive. Catherine started to worry that something might be wrong and suggested they see a doctor together to figure it out and maybe try some treatments. But Michel, being stubborn, refused to go. He came from a big family and thought the problem must be with Catherine, considering his own family's fertility history compared to hers, as she was an only child. Using their family backgrounds as evidence, he started blaming her for being infertile, which only made things worse between them. Eventually, their frustrations and misunderstandings grew so much that they ended up getting divorced. Despite the scars from their past, Catherine decided to greet Michel politely, recognizing that time had passed since they last met. However, her warm attitude was met with coldness and disdain from Michel. "Are you alone?" "Still single, I see," he said arrogantly, his eyes reflecting superiority and indifference towards Catherine. With a gesture implying his supposed superiority, he introduced the young man beside him. "This is my son, Austin," he announced proudly, as if it were a personal accomplishment. "He's a real genius, just like my new wife, Sophie," he added, nodding towards a woman at another table, a hint of pride in his voice as he talked about his new family. Catherine was astonished by Michel's arrogance. She had hoped that after so many years, things might have changed between them, but his behavior showed otherwise. It was clear that he was still as proud as ever. However, little did Michel know, something was about to happen that would shake up his entire family's destiny and change the course of his own history forever. As they talked, a tall and caring young boy approached Catherine. Seeing the concern on her face, the boy, with a protective instinct, asked, "Is everything all right, Mom?" Catherine's face lit up at the sight of her son, and she replied warmly, "Yes, everything's fine, my dear. I'm happy you're here. I ran into someone from the past while waiting for you." She gave her son a loving kiss on the cheek, appreciating his care. "I want you to meet my son, Michel," Catherine continued, smiling as she noticed the surprise on Michel's face. "This is Nathan." Michel couldn't conceal his surprise upon discovering that Catherine had a son. His eyes widened, reflecting a whirlwind of thoughts as he realized the boy was already a teenager, about 15 years old. Before Michel could say anything, the waiter arrived with Catherine's lunch, breaking the moment. Taking advantage of the interruption, Catherine excused herself and joined her son, leaving Michel lost in his thoughts. Returning to his table with his son and wife, Michel appeared distant, his mind elsewhere. While Sophie and Austin enjoyed their meals, Michel seemed preoccupied, his thoughts consumed by a single idea. Could Nathan be his son? Was it possible that Catherine was pregnant when they separated and never told him? But why would she keep it a secret? These questions consumed Michel, overshadowing his ability to enjoy the present moment. Before he could find answers, Sophie's voice broke through his thoughts, snapping him back to reality. As days passed, Michel couldn't shake the issue from his mind. He dreaded facing the truth that haunted him. How would Sophie react to learning he had a child from his past marriage? And what about Austin? How would he feel discovering he had an older brother? The idea of confronting Catherine, fearing she might demand financial support, only added to his anxiety. Despite the swirling uncertainties and doubts in his mind, Michel couldn't ignore the overwhelming curiosity pushing him to uncover the truth. How could this be possible? Michel questioned himself relentlessly. He was convinced that Catherine was unable to have children, especially after years of failed attempts to conceive together. Michel's experience with Sophie had been vastly different. A few years after his divorce, he met Sophie, and she soon became pregnant with Austin. Upon hearing the news, they swiftly decided to marry, embarking on a new life together. These contrasting circumstances only deepened Michel's doubts and confusion about the possibility of Nathan being his son. Michel found himself caught in a profound internal struggle. On one side, he yearned for the truth, but on the other, he dreaded the potential upheaval in his life if Nathan turned out to be his son. His pride urged him to maintain the facade of a perfect family with Sophie and Austin, convincing himself that Nathan and Catherine's reappearance would only bring chaos and disruption. Yet, Catherine's persistent silence on the matter intrigued him further. Why would she keep Nathan a secret from him? This mystery intensified his curiosity and deepened his doubts. Meanwhile, Sophie began to notice her husband's distant demeanor. Michel always seemed lost in thought, and it concerned her deeply. Determined to uncover the cause of his distress, she confronted him, ready to face whatever truth lay behind his troubled behavior. Feeling trapped and unable to keep his worries to himself any longer, Michel finally opened up to his wife about his suspicions. Sophie was taken aback by Michel's revelations, her eyes widening in disbelief and apprehension. "Do you think Nathan could be your son?" she asked, her voice betraying surprise and uncertainty. Taking a deep breath, Michel mustered the courage to admit his suspicions. "Yes, I believe it's a possibility," he confessed, his voice tinged with doubt. Concern furrowed Sophie's brow. "But Michel, this could turn our lives upside down. Are you sure it's wise to pursue this truth?" she asked, her apprehension evident in her tone. Michel nodded resolutely. "I have to know, Sophie. If Catherine won't tell me the truth, then I'll arrange for a DNA test," he declared firmly, his decision firm and unwavering. "No, Michel, please don't do this," Sophie pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "We shouldn't get mixed up in their lives," she reasoned, attempting to sway her husband. "Let's just leave the past where it belongs and focus on our future." Sophie tried everything to dissuade Michel from pursuing the truth, convinced it was best to leave things in the past. She thought she had convinced him, but Michel remained resolute in his determination to uncover the truth. Against Sophie's wishes, Michel decided to contact Catherine and arrange a meeting, determined to seek answers. Catherine was taken aback when Michel reached out to her after their unexpected encounter at the restaurant. She never expected to hear from him again, recalling his arrogance from their past. Initially hesitant, she declined his invitation. However, Michel's persistence eventually persuaded her to agree, albeit reluctantly. "Catherine, there's something important we need to discuss," Michel began, sounding unsure. "It's been weighing on my mind since our meeting at the restaurant. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I need to know the truth," he asserted firmly. "What's this about? What do you mean?" Catherine asked, puzzled. "You know exactly what I'm referring to," Michel snapped back. "I'm talking about Nathan. If he's my son, I deserve to know," he declared emphatically. "Oh, so that's why you were so surprised at the restaurant," Catherine chuckled, putting the pieces together. "What's so funny?" Michel demanded. "I deserve to know the truth." "No, Nathan isn't yours," Catherine affirmed, frustrated by Michel's insistence. Unsatisfied, Michel pressed on. "Then whose son is he?" he demanded. "You, a single mom with a 15-year-old son. He has to be mine. I just don't understand how that's possible. You were infertile." "You always jump to conclusions," Catherine shot back, annoyed by Michel's accusations. "Nathan isn't yours. I've already told you he's Gregory's son, my husband's." Michel was taken aback, and Catherine clarified, "Nathan isn't 15. He's tall like my husband, but he's actually just about to turn 14. There's no way he could be your son," Catherine asserted. "After our divorce, I went to see a doctor to figure out why I couldn't conceive and maybe explore treatment options," she explained. "But the doctor told me there was nothing wrong. I was perfectly healthy and capable of getting pregnant. And that's exactly what happened. Once Gregory and I got married, I became pregnant with Nathan, and later on, we had 2 more sons, Evan, who is 10, and Theo, who is 7. After the confrontation with Catherine and the revelation that Nathan wasn't his son, Michel felt deeply intrigued and disturbed. Catherine's words made him question everything he believed about his fertility and his relationship with Sophie. Angry and confused, Michel tried to make sense of it all. He couldn't understand how, coming from a large family, he only had one child with Sophie, while Catherine, whom he thought was infertile, had 3 children with her husband. Ultimately, Michel decided to take Catherine's advice and see a doctor. Sophie, thinking she had convinced him to move on from the past, had no idea what Michel was up to, and he couldn't anticipate what he would discover. The medical tests revealed a truth that rocked Michel to his core. He was sterile. This revelation triggered a flood of questions about his marriage to Sophie. How could he have fathered a child with her if he was sterile? This newfound knowledge cast doubt on the very foundation of their relationship. Michel spent a considerable amount of time lost in thought, contemplating the significance of this revelation and its implications for his life and his marriage to Sophie. He was faced with the daunting task of redefining his identity and role as a husband and father. Amidst the turmoil of this painful discovery, when he confronted Sophie, Michel was devastated to learn the truth about Austine. She admitted that during the early stages of their relationship, she had a brief affair with another man, resulting in her pregnancy with Austine. The revelation left Michel utterly shattered, feeling as though his entire life had crumbled around him. His pride and confidence in his fertility had blinded him to the truth for so long. Now he was confronted with a new reality that shook the very core of his beliefs about his marriage and his role as a father. Michel had to come to terms with this newfound truth. He found himself faced with the daunting task of rebuilding his relationship with Sophie on a foundation of shattered trust. Moreover, he grappled with the emotional challenge of reconciling his feelings towards Austine, knowing he wasn't his biological son but still loving him as his own child. This revelation marked a profound turning point for Michel, but he understood the necessity of forging ahead and reconstructing his life upon this newfound truth. This narrative underscores the vital role truth plays in fostering healthy and enduring relationships. Honesty, both with oneself and with others, serves as a cornerstone for nurturing mutual trust and respect. Moreover, the story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of confronting our own biases and egos, which can obscure our perception of reality and hinder our ability to truly see those around us. Have you ever experienced a moment where the revelation of truth completely altered your perspective on something or someone in your life? If you found this story engaging, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Feel free to leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to indicate your level of appreciation for the narrative. Also, check out the video currently displayed on your screen. Until next time.
Life often feels like a balancing act between dreams and reality. I'm Anna, a 28-year-old marketing strategist, juggling my professional aspirations with a personal dream that's always seemed just out of reach. This dream, a quaint boutique cafe, has been my sanctuary in thought for years. Every evening, as I return from work, the comforting embrace of my home greets me. It's not just the 4 walls and the furniture that make it so, it's also Daniel, my partner. His presence has always been a source of comfort and stability. "How was your day?" he asks, his voice tinged with genuine interest. "Exhausting, but productive," I reply, sinking into our cozy sofa. Daniel joins me, his hand finding mine, a silent symbol of support. Our conversations often drift to dreams and future plans. He's always been supportive, at least in words. "How's the dream fund looking?" Daniel inquires, a playful curiosity in his eyes. I chuckle. "Growing, slowly but steadily. Just checked it this morning and it's looking promising." The Dream Fund, a special savings account known only to Daniel and my best friend Sophie. Sophie and I have shared this dream since high school, our bond cemented by our mutual aspirations. Sophie called today, I mention. She's excited about a new decor idea for the cafe. Daniel smiles, but there's a flicker of something else in his expression, something I can't quite place. "You and your cafe dreams," he teases gently. "I love your passion, Anna." That night, after Daniel has fallen asleep, I find myself unable to rest. A nagging feeling tugs at the back of my mind, urging me to check something. Quietly, I reach for my laptop and log into the online banking portal. The Dream Fund. My heart sinks. The numbers don't add up. There's a significant withdrawal, one I didn't authorize. $5,000, just gone. My mind races. It has to be a mistake. Morning comes with a heavy air. Daniel is already in the kitchen, brewing coffee. Daniel, we need to talk, I say, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He turns, a flicker of concern crossing his face. What's wrong? The dream fund. There's $5,000 missing. Did you? I trail off, the question hanging heavily between us. Daniel's eyes shift, avoiding mine. Yeah, I took it. Needed it for something important. I'll put it back, I promise. I feel a mix of betrayal and disbelief. You took it without asking? Daniel, you know how much that means to me. He sighs, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. It's just money, Anna. We're a team, right? What's mine is yours, and vice versa. But that money was for our dream, not for what did you even need it for? It's complicated. I'll sort it out. Don't worry about it. His tone is dismissive, brushing off my concerns. I stand there, feeling a chasm widening between us. But this isn't just about the money. It's about trust, respect, and shared dreams. As I look at Daniel, I wonder if he truly understands what this dream means to me, or if he ever did. The days following the discovery of the missing funds were filled with a tense silence between Daniel and me. His casual dismissal of my concerns had left a sour taste, and I found myself questioning the foundations of our relationship. But little did I know, life was about to throw an even more devastating curveball my way. It was a Wednesday like any other. I was crossing the street, lost in thoughts about the cafe, when it happened. A car, speeding, out of control, crashed into me. Pain exploded through my body, and then darkness. I awoke to a symphony of beeps and murmurs, the sterile smell of a hospital filling my senses. Panic set in as I tried to open my eyes, but was met with only darkness. An attempt to move revealed another horror. My legs were unresponsive. Anna, you're awake, a familiar voice said. It was Sophie, her tone a mix of relief and sorrow. What happened? I can't see. My legs. Sophie's hand squeezed mine. You were in an accident. The doctors, they said your eyes were badly damaged, and your spine. The words hit me like a tidal wave. Blind and paralyzed, the reality was too much to bear. My dream, the cafe, our plans, all slipping away like sand through fingers. Daniel's visits were infrequent and brief. His voice, once filled with warmth, now seemed distant, strained. How are you feeling? He'd ask, but the words felt hollow. Sophie, on the other hand, was my rock. She'd sit with me for hours, her presence a comforting constant in my new dark world. We'll get through this, Anna. I'm here for you, she'd say, her voice laced with determination. But as days turned into weeks, a gnawing suspicion began to grow within me. Daniel's visits became even rarer, and when he did show up, his phone seemed more interesting than my plight. His responses were curt, his patience thin. Daniel, why aren't you saying much? I asked during one of his silent visits. What's there to say, Anna? It's not like things can go back to how they were, he replied, his words cutting deeper than any physical pain I had endured. The hospital room felt more like a prison, trapping me with my thoughts and fears. Was Daniel pulling away because of my condition? And Sophie, why was she so adamant about not letting me give up? Then came the day of my discharge. Daniel arrived, his tone unusually gentle. It's time to go home, Anna. But the journey didn't take us home. Instead, the car stopped at an unfamiliar place. Confusion and fear mingled within me. Daniel, where are we? My voice trembled. Just a place to help you relax. A change of scenery, he said, his voice too calm. His hands guided me into a building, empty, echoing. Then, the unimaginable happened. You're a hassle now, Anna. Just live here. His voice was cold, devoid of the man I once knew. A door slammed, a lock clicked, abandoned, alone, in darkness and despair. My calls for help were swallowed by the silence. The realization hit me. I was not just physically impaired, I was utterly alone. As tears streamed down my face, a glimmer of hope appeared. A familiar voice, filled with warmth and urgency. Anna, Sophie. The sound of Sophie's voice was like a lifeline in the abyss of my despair. Sophie? Is that really you? My voice trembled with a mix of hope and disbelief. Yes, it's me, Anna. I'm here now. Sophie's voice cracked with emotion as she embraced me, her presence a stark contrast to the cold abandonment I had just experienced. How did you find me? I asked, my mind still reeling from Daniel's betrayal. I suspected something was off when Daniel was vague about your discharge details. I followed him, she explained, her tone revealing a mixture of anger and concern. Sophie wheeled me out of the desolate building, the sounds and scents of the outside world feeling both foreign and familiar. The ride to her apartment was quiet. each of us lost in our thoughts. Once settled in Sophie's guest room, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was now blind, paralyzed, and betrayed by the person I had trusted most. But in this darkest hour, Sophie's unwavering support provided a glimmer of hope. "Anna, I promise you we'll get through this. You're not alone," Sophie assured me, her hand gripping mine firmly. Over the next few days, she became my eyes and legs. She described the world outside, helped me with physical therapy, and even brought up our old dream of the cafe, though I could hardly bear to think about it. "It's still our dream, Anna. Don't let him take that away from you, too," Sophie urged, her voice filled with passion. Her words stirred something within me, a flicker of the old fire, the determination that had once defined me. But it was overshadowed by a deep-seated sense of betrayal and loss. Why did he do this, Sophie? Why did Daniel abandon me? The question haunted me, the answer elusive and painful. Sophie sighed, a mixture of sadness and anger in her voice. "I don't know, Anna, but I do know this. You deserved better. We'll find a way to make him answer for what he's done." Her promise of justice brought a small comfort, but the road ahead seemed insurmountable. Yet in the depths of despair, I found a newfound determination to rise again, fueled by Sophie's unwavering support and the faint ember of my own resilience. In the weeks that followed, my world remained shrouded in darkness, both literally and metaphorically. Yet amidst this bleak landscape, Sophie's presence was a beacon of hope. She took care of me with a dedication that went beyond friendship, becoming my pillar of strength. One day, as I sat contemplating in Sophie's living room, she broached a subject I had been avoiding. "Anna, I've been thinking about our cafe dream," I sighed, feeling a pang of sorrow. "Sophie, I don't think I can." "Listen to me," she interrupted gently. "This dream isn't just about a cafe. It's about us, our journey, our resilience. I want to make it happen, for both of us." Her words ignited a spark within me. Despite my physical limitations, the dream we had nurtured for so long still held a special place in my heart. "Let's do it then," I said, a sense of purpose returning to my voice. "Let's make our dream a reality." With renewed vigor, we began planning. Sophie would handle the physical aspects while I contributed with ideas and decisions. It was during this time that karma began to catch up with Daniel. Sophie had discreetly started a legal process against Daniel for his abandonment and misuse of our funds. The law was on our side, and soon Daniel faced the consequences of his actions. He was arrested for fraud and abandonment, a news that brought a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. Months passed, and our dream cafe began to take shape. It was a quaint, cozy place, filled with the warmth and love we had poured into it. Named Echoes, it became a symbol of our journey and a testament to overcoming adversity. The grand opening was a bittersweet moment. As guests filled the cafe, their voices a harmonious blend of excitement and admiration, I felt a mixture of pride and longing. I wished I could see the fruition of our efforts, but the joy in Sophie's voice as she described every detail painted a vivid picture in my mind. Then an unexpected visitor arrived. Daniel. His presence caused a stir, his face a mask of shock and disbelief as he took in the thriving cafe he had never believed in. "Anna, he started, but his words were cut short by Sophie's firm tone. "Save it, Daniel. You lost the right to be a part of this a long time ago." His attempts to speak were drowned out by the supportive murmurs of our guests who had come to know our story. Daniel left, defeated, and alone, a stark contrast to the vibrant community that had gathered in our cafe. In that moment, I realized that while I had lost my sight and mobility, I had gained something far greater, a sense of accomplishment, a community that supported us, and a friendship that had stood the test of the darkest times. The success of Echoes, our dream cafe, was a testament to our resilience, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Despite the joy and sense of achievement, I grappled with the reality of my disability and the lingering shadows of betrayal. Sophie was my constant companion, but she encouraged me to start embracing my independence. With her gentle nudging, I began to explore the world of adaptive technologies and found ways to contribute more actively to the cafe. I took on administrative tasks, using voice-activated software to manage our finances and social media. It was during one of my afternoons at the cafe that I met Lucas, a regular customer whose kindness and gentle voice quickly caught my attention. He would often sit at the counter, striking up conversations about everything from books to music, making me laugh and slowly bringing light into my world. "Anna, have you ever tried this cake? It's my favorite here," Lucas asked one day, his tone warm and inviting. I smiled, appreciating his effort to include me. "I haven't, but I trust your taste. Maybe you can describe it to me?" As Lucas detailed the flavors and textures, I found myself enjoying the simple pleasure of his company. Our conversations became a highlight of my days, and I sensed a growing connection between us. However, the scars of my past experience with Daniel made me cautious. I was hesitant to open my heart again, fearing the vulnerability that came with it. One evening, after the cafe had closed, Sophie sat down beside me. "Anna, I've noticed how you light up around Lucas. He seems like a really good guy." "I know, but I'm scared, Sophie. After everything with Daniel, how can I trust someone again?" Sophie took my hand, her voice sincere. "You deserve happiness, Anna. Don't let Daniel's actions define your future. Lucas is not him." Her words resonated with me, and I decided to take a chance. Gradually, I opened up to Lucas, sharing my fears, hopes, and dreams. To my relief and joy, he accepted me for who I was, disability and all. Our relationship blossomed, and Lucas became an integral part of my life. He brought a sense of normalcy and happiness that I hadn't felt in a long time. With him, I rediscovered the joy of being in love, the excitement of planning a future together. As I navigated this new phase of my life, I realized that healing wasn't just about overcoming physical challenges, but also about allowing myself to trust and love again. Lucas's presence in my life was a gentle reminder that even in the darkest times, there are rays of hope and new beginnings waiting to be embraced. The months following my relationship with Lucas were like a gentle sunrise after a long, dark night. Our love grew, enveloping me in warmth and security I hadn't known since before the accident. Lucas's acceptance and love helped heal the scars left by Daniel's betrayal. "Anna, I love you for who you are, and I want to be with you, no matter what the future holds," Lucas said to me one evening, his words sincere and full of emotion. His declaration was a balm to my soul. I had come to love him deeply, his presence a source of joy and comfort. With Lucas, I felt a sense of completeness, a feeling that I was no longer defined by my disabilities, but by the love and strength I possessed. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of doubt and fear, but together we navigated them with understanding and patience. Lucas's unwavering support in both my personal life and our work at the cafe made me realize how much I had grown and how much I could still achieve. Meanwhile, Echoes continued to thrive, becoming more than just a cafe. It was a community hub, a place of warmth and acceptance. Sophie and I often marveled at how our dream had blossomed, becoming a source of inspiration for others facing their own challenges. As time passed, Sophie also found love. Her partner, a carpenter who had helped with the cafe renovations, was a kind and gentle soul. Their relationship, much like mine and Lucas's, was built on mutual respect and shared dreams. One day, as we sat in the cafe after closing time, Sophie said to me, "Anna, do you realize how far we've come? From dreaming about this place in high school to making it a reality despite everything?" I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. "I do, and I couldn't have done it without you, Sophie. You saved me in more ways than one." Our conversation turned to the future, to the possibilities that lay ahead. We talked about expanding the cafe, hosting community events, and even starting a podcast to share our story and inspire others. As I sat there, chatting and laughing with Sophie and Lucas, I realized that my journey had come full circle. From the depths of despair to the heights of happiness, I had traversed a path filled with trials and triumphs. Life had thrown its worst at me, but with the support of those I loved and my own inner strength, I had emerged stronger and more resilient. My story was one of betrayal and heartache, but more importantly, it was a story of hope, love, and the power of dreams. And as I looked forward to the future, I knew that whatever challenges it might bring, I was ready to face them head-on, with love and hope as my guiding lights. "So, how much was your mother's inheritance?" Martin's words sliced through the silence, jolting me back to the grim reality. I turned to face him, my heart sinking. Not a word of consolation, no gentle touch or shared sorrow, just a blatant, almost indecent inquiry about money. It was grotesquely inappropriate, especially coming from him, and especially here at my mother's funeral. I stared at him, taken aback, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. "Martin, is this really the time to— $1 million, wasn't it?" He cut me off, his eyes not reflecting the gravity of the moment, but rather a calculating coldness. I sighed, my heart heavy with a grief that was now tinged with bitterness. "Yes, around that. But after taxes and everything, it's not as much as you think." Martin hummed noncommittally, a smug smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. That expression, so devoid of empathy, made my stomach churn. This was not the man I had married. Or perhaps he was, and I had just refused to see it. I should have been outraged, incensed. But more than anything, I felt weary. Weary of this charade of a marriage, weary of Martin's callousness. Yet, in that weariness, there was a spark, a burgeoning resolve. I wouldn't let him get away with this, not this time. As I watched him stroll away, already lost in his scheming thoughts, a plan began to take shape in my mind. Martin was naive if he thought he could just waltz in and claim what was mine, what was my mother's. He had underestimated me for far too long. It was time for Martin to learn that I wasn't just a silent spectator in his selfish play. The roles were about to be reversed, and I, Elaine, would be the one to draw the curtain on this act of greed and deceit. Martin and I were married when I was just 22, a match more of convenience than of love. Our families, both prominent in business, saw it as a strategic union. I remember walking down the aisle, feeling more like a pawn in a chess game than a bride. Martin, 5 years my senior, shared my lack of enthusiasm. It was a mutual understanding, unspoken yet palpable. The early years were marked by a lukewarm companionship, but as time wore on, the distance between us grew. The absence of children only widened the chasm. We had tried, initially with hope, then with desperation, and finally with a resigned acceptance that it wasn't meant to be. "You should get out more, do something useful," Martin would often say, his words dripping with a subtle, stinging disdain. His indifference to my struggles, to our struggles, was like a slowly tightening noose. It was during these years that the foundation of our already fragile relationship crumbled. Martin's family business, once thriving, fell into disarray. His father's untimely passing in an accident revealed a slew of financial misdoings, tax evasions, debts, a whole web of deceit. The fallout was catastrophic. Assets seized, reputations tarnished, and our once comfortable life shattered into pieces. We managed to hold on to the house, but little else. I watched as Martin's demeanor changed, from aloof to bitter, his pride wounded, his ego bruised, and in his bitterness he became even more detached, leaving me to navigate the storm alone. The following years were a blur of caregiving for Martin's ailing mother. The woman who once looked at me with warmth and affection had grown cold and resentful in her illness. Martin, ever the absent son, left the burden entirely on my shoulders. His visits were brief, his interactions perfunctory. "Elaine, you need to handle this better," he would often say, his tone dismissive, as if the weight of the responsibility was mine alone to bear. I had hoped, perhaps naively, that adversity would bring us closer. Instead, it only highlighted the vast, unbridgeable gap between us. The realization that our marriage was nothing more than a facade was a bitter pill to swallow. But swallow it I did, with a growing resolve that I would not let this be the end of my story. As night fell and the house plunged into darkness, I knew one thing for certain. I could not, would not, let Martin control my fate any longer. The seeds of a plan, sown in anger and watered by years of neglect, were beginning to take root. It was time for Martin to reap what he had sown. As I prepared my morning tea, my mind wandered back to the years that had silently slipped by, each one leaving its mark on my life like the rings of a tree, recording a history of quiet endurance and unspoken sorrow. Those years were defined by a singular, relentless responsibility, caring for Martin's mother. She had suffered a debilitating stroke, transforming her from the once vibrant woman I knew into a shadow of her former self. The weight of her care fell squarely on my shoulders, a burden that Martin seemed all too willing to ignore. Elaine, why don't you put her in a home? It's too much for you, my friends would suggest, their concern genuine but tinged with a helplessness that mirrored my own. But something held me back, a sense of duty perhaps, or the faint hope that this sacrifice would somehow mend the fissures in our fractured family. Martin's contributions were limited to occasional cursory visits, each one a painful reminder of the emotional void that lay between us. "You're doing a fine job with Mother," he would comment, a hollow commendation that left me feeling more isolated than ever. It was during this period of prolonged solitude that I received the news of my own mother's passing. The grief was overwhelming, not just for the loss of a beloved parent, but for the realization of how alone I truly was. My inheritance, a sum that should have brought some measure of comfort, only served as a catalyst for Martin's avarice. The day after his crass inquiry about the inheritance, my resolve hardened. I had endured enough. The loveless marriage, the thankless role of a caregiver, the constant belittlement. It was time for a reckoning. As I sipped my tea, staring out at the garden overgrown with neglect, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. If Martin was so eager to claim my inheritance, then let him try. But he would soon learn that I was no longer the passive compliant wife he had taken for granted. With each passing day as I tended to his mother, I fortified my resolve. I would use the inheritance not as a means to enrich our lives, but as a weapon to reclaim my own. It was a risky, bold move, one that went against everything I had been taught about patience and sacrifice. But I was done waiting, done hoping for a change that would never come. The wheels were already in motion. Martin, blinded by his greed, couldn't see the trap I was laying, and by the time he realized it would be too late. After years of being underestimated and overlooked, I was finally ready to turn the tables. As I prepared my morning tea, my mind wandered back to the years that had silently slipped by, each one leaving its mark on my life like the rings of a tree, recording a history of quiet endurance and unspoken sorrow. Those years were defined by a singular, relentless responsibility, caring for Martin's mother. She had suffered a debilitating stroke, transforming her from the once vibrant woman I knew into a shadow of her former self. The weight of her care fell squarely on my shoulders, a burden that Martin seemed all too willing to ignore. "Elaine, why don't you put her in a home? It's too much for you," my friends would suggest, their concern genuine, but tinged with a helplessness that mirrored my own. But something held me back. A sense of duty, perhaps, or the faint hope that this sacrifice would somehow mend the fissures in our fractured family. Martin's contributions were limited to occasional, cursory visits, each one a painful reminder of the emotional void that lay between us. "You're doing a fine job with Mother," he would comment, a hollow commendation that left me feeling more isolated than ever. It was during this period of prolonged solitude that I received the news of my own mother's passing. The grief was overwhelming, not just for the loss of a beloved parent, but for the realization of how alone I truly was. My inheritance, a sum that should have brought some measure of comfort, only served as a catalyst for Martin's avarice. The day after his crass inquiry about the inheritance, my resolve hardened. I had endured enough. The loveless marriage, the thankless role of a caregiver, the constant belittlement. It was time for a reckoning. As I sipped my tea, staring out at the garden overgrown with neglect, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. If Martin was so eager to claim my inheritance, then let him try. But he would soon learn that I was no longer the passive, compliant wife he had taken for granted. With each passing day as I tended to his mother, I fortified my resolve. I would use the inheritance not as a means to enrich our lives, but as a weapon to reclaim my own. It was a risky, bold move, one that went against everything I had been taught about patience and sacrifice. But I was done waiting, done hoping for a change that would never come. The wheels were already in motion. Martin, blinded by his greed, couldn't see the trap I was laying, and by the time he realized, it would be too late. After years of being underestimated and overlooked, I was finally ready to turn the tables. The day began like any other, with the quiet routine that had become my life's rhythm. But beneath the calm surface, there was a current of anticipation, a sense of an impending storm that was about to break. It was a few weeks after Martin's crass inquiry about the inheritance. In that time, I had meticulously planned every step, every move. My resolve had only grown stronger, fueled by the years of neglect and emotional abandonment. Then, without warning, the routine was shattered. Martin didn't come home one evening. At first, I thought it was just another late night at work, a common occurrence in his increasingly erratic schedule. But as hours turned into a full day, and then another, worry gave way to suspicion. Had he finally acted on his greed? My suspicions were confirmed when I discovered the documents related to my mother's inheritance were missing. Martin had taken them. It was a bold move, even for him, and it reeked of desperation. The man I had lived with for years, who had rarely shown any initiative or courage, had finally made his move, and it was against me. But instead of panic or fear, I felt a strange sense of liberation. This was the sign I had been waiting for, the catalyst to break free from the shackles of this loveless marriage. I knew Martin thought he had the upper hand, but he was playing a game whose rules I had rewritten. As I began to put my plan into action, another revelation came to light, one that would change everything. Hidden among my mother's papers, which Martin had carelessly overlooked, was a document detailing a substantial investment she had made years ago, an investment that had grown significantly over time. It was a fortune he didn't know existed, and one he couldn't touch. The irony was almost poetic. In his greed, Martin had grabbed at what he thought was a fortune, only to miss the real treasure that lay hidden. And in his haste, he had given me the perfect opportunity to escape the prison of our marriage. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I saw a future that was mine to shape. I would start by securing my newfound wealth, ensuring it was beyond Martin's reach, and then I would confront him, not as the meek wife he thought he knew, but as a woman reborn in the fires of betrayal and hardship. The game had changed, and I was now the one in control. The revelation of the hidden fortune was like a key unlocking a door I had long thought sealed. With Martin's disappearance and his betrayal laid bare, the path forward was clear. It was not just a path of escape, but of justice, a chance to reclaim not only my inheritance, but my dignity. In the days that followed, I moved with a purpose that felt foreign, yet exhilarating. I secured the hidden assets, ensuring they were safely out of Martin's reach. I also initiated the legal proceedings for divorce, a step I had never imagined I would have the strength to take. Then, as unexpectedly as he had vanished, Martin returned. He came back under the guise of reconciliation, feigning concern and remorse. But his eyes gave him away. They were the eyes of a man defeated, not by circumstances, but by his own avarice. "Elaine, I've been a fool," Martin began, his voice laden with a contrived penitence. "Let's put this behind us and start over." Start over? The audacity of the suggestion was almost laughable. After years of indifference, after his brazen theft, he expected forgiveness and a fresh start. It was a testament to how little he understood me, how little he had ever cared to know me. "No, Martin, there's no starting over," I replied, my voice steady and resolute. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." The shock on his face was palpable, a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization that the woman he thought he could control was gone. In her place stood someone he couldn't manipulate or dismiss. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Martin's true colors were revealed. His attempts to contest the divorce were feeble, his arguments laced with desperation. The man who had once held himself with an air of unearned superiority was now reduced to a pitiable figure, scrambling to salvage whatever scraps he could. The divorce was finalized swiftly, much to Martin's dismay. He was left with little, just the shell of a life he had squandered through his own selfishness. It was a fitting end for a man who had valued wealth over relationships, who had seen his wife as nothing more than a means to an end. In the aftermath, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The chains of a loveless marriage had been broken, and I was free to rebuild my life on my own terms. The fortune I had inherited would ensure my financial security, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self. Martin's fall from grace was a harsh lesson in karma. His greed and betrayal had brought him nothing but ruin, a fate he had crafted with his own hands. As for me, I stepped into a new chapter of my life with a clear conscience and a heart ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The morning after the divorce was finalized, I awoke to a world that seemed brighter, as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. The air felt fresher, the sounds of the city more vibrant. For the first time in decades, I felt a sense of excitement about the future. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in new experiences. I resumed my long-abandoned hobby of pottery, finding solace in the rhythmic motion of the spinning wheel and the malleable clay in my hands. Each piece I created was a reflection of my journey, imperfect, unique, and brimming with newfound hope. I also reconnected with old friends and made new ones. Their support and companionship filled a void in my life that I hadn't realized was so gaping. We shared stories, laughter, and moments of introspection, reminding me that there was a world beyond the confines of my former marriage. As I rebuilt my life, I often thought of Martin. He had once been a central figure in my world, but now he felt like a distant memory, a chapter that had been firmly closed. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had struggled to adjust to his new reality. He had lost his job and, with it, the pretense of the life he had tried so hard to maintain. There was no joy in hearing of his misfortunes. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement that his choices had led him to this point. It was a stark reminder that we are the architects of our own fate. In this new chapter of my life, I found joy in the simple pleasures, the warmth of the sun on my face, the laughter of friends, the satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. I also discovered a strength within myself that I hadn't known existed. It was a strength born of adversity, of facing my fears and emerging on the other side. As I sat in my pottery class, shaping a new piece on the wheel, I realized that this was just the beginning. Life, like the clay in my hands, was malleable. It could be shaped and reshaped, and it was never too late to start anew. The journey I had embarked on was not just about moving past a failed marriage or reclaiming my inheritance. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I wanted from life. And with each passing day, I felt more confident, more alive. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It excited me. With the lessons of the past etched in my heart and the promise of tomorrow in my eyes, I stepped forward into a world of endless possibilities. I never imagined a simple phone call could shatter my evening. The voice on the other end, Nathan's unmistakable tone, dripped with condescension. "Emily, you'll be thrilled to know I'm getting married, and guess what? You're invited." His words hit me like a slap. Nathan, my ex, whom I had not heard from in months, was now inviting me to his wedding. The audacity of it made my blood boil. But it wasn't just any wedding. He was marrying Rachel, my former boss, the woman who had subtly sabotaged my career. "You must be joking," I spat into the phone, my voice quivering with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Oh, come on, Emily. Don't be bitter. It's a celebration. You should see how happy we are together," Nathan taunted. There was a smugness in his voice that I had come to despise. The memories of our relationship flooded back. Nathan, who once whispered sweet nothings, had turned into a man who derived pleasure from my pain. I remembered the nights I had spent crying over his harsh words, the days I walked on eggshells trying to please him. And Rachel, the boss, who always found fault in my work, no matter how hard I tried. The duo had made my life miserable. "You know what, Nathan? I'll be there," I said, my voice now steady with resolve. I could almost hear the smirk in his voice widen. "Great. It'll be nice to have you there to witness my happiness. After all, you always said you wanted the best for me," he sneered before hanging up. I stood there, phone still in hand, feeling a storm brewing inside me. The hurt and humiliation I had suffered at their hands wouldn't be forgotten. They expected me to show up, tail between my legs, defeated. But I had other plans. My mind raced through the possibilities. This wedding could be my chance, not to make amends, but to serve them a slice of the bitterness they had fed me. They wanted me to be a silent witness to their joy, a reminder of their victory over me, but I would not give them that satisfaction. I dialed Lisa, my high school friend and the only person who knew the entire sordid saga. "Lisa, I need your help," I said as soon as she picked up. "Emily, what's wrong?" Concern laced her voice. "Nathan and Rachel are getting married, and they've invited me to their wedding. I'm planning to go, but not for the reasons they think," I explained. There was a pause, and then Lisa's voice, firm and supportive. "Count me in. What do you need?" As I lay out my plan, a sense of empowerment filled me. Nathan and Rachel thought they had seen the last of me, but they were gravely mistaken. The wedding would not be their celebration, it would be their reckoning, and I, Emily, would be the architect of their downfall. The night after Nathan's call, sleep eluded me. Memories, like uninvited ghosts, swarmed my mind. It was during one of these restless hours that I found myself revisiting the beginning, the days when Nathan was more than just a voice on the phone. We met at a local coffee shop, a chance encounter that blossomed into something more. Nathan was charming, his smile disarming. I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. He was attentive, making me feel like I was the only person in the room. But time unveiled the truth. His charm faded, revealing a manipulative man beneath. He criticized my appearance, my job, even my dreams. "You really think you can make it as a writer, Emily? Be realistic," he would say, his words always laced with a subtle condescension. Then there was Rachel, my boss at the marketing firm where I worked. She was the epitome of success, confident, driven, and seemingly supportive of my career. But behind her encouraging smiles were actions intended to hinder, not help. Deadlines mysteriously changed, crucial emails accidentally deleted, and opportunities given to others. I never understood her animosity, but it wore me down, chipping away at my confidence. The breaking point came the night Nathan ended our relationship. We were at his apartment, the same place where he had first said he loved me. "Emily, we need to talk," he had begun, his voice devoid of warmth. "I don't see a future with you," he declared bluntly. "Frankly, you're just not enough for me." The words stung, leaving me breathless. I remember fumbling for words, trying to understand. But he just stood there, cold and unmoved. "You should move on, Emily. We both know you can do better than this. Than us." It felt like a cruel joke. The man who had once promised me forever was now discarding me as if I were nothing. The pain was palpable, a physical ache in my chest. The days that followed were a blur. I threw myself into work, trying to forget, to move on, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. One morning, I overheard a conversation between Rachel and another colleague. They were laughing, and Nathan's name came up. "He's taking me to this fancy place tonight," Rachel had said, a smug smile on her face. The pieces fell into place with a sickening clarity. Nathan hadn't just left me, he had left me for her. My boss. My mentor. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but bitterness, I realized, could be a powerful motivator. As dawn broke, bringing light to a new day, a plan began to take shape in my mind. Nathan and Rachel wanted to parade their happiness in front of me, to prove they had won. But this was a game I refused to lose. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Lisa, ever the loyal friend, was my sounding board, helping me flesh out the details of my plan. "We need to hit them where it hurts," she had said, her voice fierce over the phone. And that's exactly what we intended to do. The days leading up to the wedding were a mix of dread and determination. I could feel the weight of the upcoming confrontation, a heavy cloak draped over my shoulders. Yet there was a fire burning within me, fueled by the betrayal and hurt Nathan and Rachel had caused. I remember staring at my reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back. Gone was the timid, unsure Emily of the past. In her place was someone stronger, someone who refused to be a victim of circumstance. Lisa was instrumental during this time. "You're not alone in this, Emily," she reminded me often. We spent nights poring over our plan, refining each detail. It was more than just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. The wedding invitation lay on my table, a constant reminder of the looming day. Nathan's words echoed in my head. "You always said you wanted the best for me." How ironic. The best for Nathan had always meant the worst for me. My job situation hadn't improved since Rachel's underhanded tactics. I was passed over for promotions, my projects sidelined, It seemed Rachel's influence was far-reaching, but I refused to let that break me. Instead, I channeled my energy into uncovering their secrets. Lisa and I dug deep, uncovering a trail of lies and deceit that Nathan and Rachel had left in their wake. It was shocking, yet not entirely surprising. "They're not just cheating partners, they're cheaters in life," Lisa said one evening, her voice laced with disgust. We had found evidence of financial embezzlement, fraudulent activities linked directly to Nathan and Rachel. Their perfect facade was just that, a facade. Behind closed doors, they were nothing but frauds, thriving on the misery of others. It was sickening to realize how blind I had been to Nathan's true nature. As the day of the wedding approached, my resolve only strengthened. I was ready to face them, to expose them for who they truly were. The thought of their downfall brought a sense of satisfaction, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. My mind raced with thoughts of the upcoming confrontation. I knew there was no turning back. This was my moment, my chance to right the wrongs that had been done to me. I arrived at the wedding venue, my heart pounding in my chest. The place was decorated beautifully, a stark contrast to the ugliness that was about to unfold. As I entered the hall, I could feel eyes on me, whispers filling the air. Nathan and Rachel were at the front, basking in the adulation of their guests. They looked like the perfect couple, but I knew better. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was it, the moment of truth. The time had come to reveal Nathan and Rachel for who they really were, and I was ready to watch their world come crashing down. The wedding hall buzzed with the chatter of guests, a symphony of oblivious celebration. As I walked through the crowd, my every step was measured, purposeful. Lisa, a few steps behind, gave me an encouraging nod. We were ready to unveil the truth hidden beneath the glossy veneer of Nathan and Rachel's perfect union. I spotted them, the center of attention, laughing and toasting with their guests. Rachel, in her ivory gown, looked radiant, while Nathan was the picture of a proud groom. The sight of them, so smug in their happiness, reignited the anger within me. "Emily, you made it." Nathan's voice cut through the crowd as he approached me, a condescending smile plastered on his face. "I must say, I'm surprised you came." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Rachel, overhearing our exchange, glided over with a glass of champagne in her hand. "Emily, darling, how wonderful to see you. I'm so glad you could join us on our special day." Her words, dripping with faux sweetness, made my skin crawl. "I wouldn't miss this. Congratulations, Rachel. You must be thrilled," I said, forcing a smile. "Oh, absolutely. It's everything I've ever dreamed of," she beamed, unaware of the storm about to break. I glanced around, ensuring we had the attention of the surrounding guests. "Nathan, Rachel, there's something I think everyone here should know," I began, my voice louder, carrying across the room. Nathan's expression faltered, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "What are you talking about, Emily?" he asked, a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice. I pulled out my phone, connected to the projector that had been displaying their wedding photos. Suddenly, the screen shifted, displaying emails, bank statements, and photographs, undeniable evidence of Nathan and Rachel's embezzlement and deceit. The room fell silent, the air thick with shock. Guests turned to the screen, then back to the couple, their expressions turning from confusion to disgust. "What is this, Emily? Some kind of joke?" Rachel's voice was shrill, her facade crumbling. "No joke, Rachel. Just the truth," I said firmly, holding my ground. "Everyone, these documents show how Nathan and Rachel have been embezzling money, not to mention their affair that started while Nathan and I were still together." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nathan and Rachel were now the center of a very different kind of attention. "This is absurd. You're just a bitter ex, trying to ruin our day," Nathan exclaimed, his face reddening. But the evidence was irrefutable. The guests began to whisper among themselves, their looks of admiration turning to judgment. "You two deserve each other," I said, my voice clear and strong. "But these people deserve to know who they're really celebrating." I stepped back, watching as the reality of their actions began to sink in around them. This was more than just revenge. It was justice. Their perfect day had turned into a nightmare, and as I walked away, I knew that their deceitful empire was starting to crumble. Nathan and Rachel, once untouchable, were now exposed for all to see. And I, Emily, had reclaimed my power. The aftermath of the revelation was like watching a house of cards collapse. The once joyous atmosphere of the wedding turned to chaos, with guests confronting Nathan and Rachel, their voices a cacophony of anger and disbelief. "You lied to us," one guest shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Nathan. "How could you?" Another chimed in, looking at Rachel with a mix of hurt and betrayal. Nathan and Rachel stood at the center of the storm, their masks of perfection now shattered. Nathan tried to speak, his voice drowned out by the uproar. Rachel, her composure slipping, looked around frantically, as if seeking an escape from the nightmare unfolding around her. I watched from a distance, a sense of surreal satisfaction washing over me. The pain and humiliation they had caused me were now being returned tenfold. Their reputations, their relationships, everything they had built on lies, was now crumbling before their eyes. Lisa approached me, her expression a mix of shock and awe. "You did it, Emily. They got what they deserved." "Yes, they did," I replied, my gaze still fixed on the disgraced couple. As the reality of their actions settled in, the crowd's anger turned to disgust. One by one, guests began to leave, their parting glances at Nathan and Rachel filled with scorn. "You ruined everything," Rachel screamed at me, her voice laced with venom. "This was supposed to be my day." "Your day? Based on lies and deceit?" I retorted, my voice calm yet piercing. "You and Nathan did this to yourselves." Nathan, now silent, looked defeated. The man who once held himself with such arrogance was now reduced to a shell, his facade of charm and confidence stripped away. The venue, once filled with celebration, was now a scene of devastation. Nathan and Rachel stood alone, abandoned by their guests, their sham of a marriage exposed for all to see. As I left the venue, I felt a weight off my shoulders. The ghosts of the past which had haunted me for so long were now laid to rest. I had stood up to my oppressors, exposed their true nature, and in doing so, had freed myself from their hold over me. The drive home was quiet, reflective. Lisa broke the silence. "What now, Emily?" "Now I move on," I said, a sense of peace in my voice. "I've closed this chapter of my life. It's time to start a new one." The night sky was clear, the stars shining brightly. It felt like a sign, a promise of a new beginning. Nathan and Rachel's downfall was not just an act of revenge. It was a step towards my healing. And as I looked up at the night sky, I knew that better days were ahead. Nathan and Rachel were now just a part of my past, a lesson learned in the journey of life. And I, Emily, was ready to embrace whatever came next. In the weeks following the wedding fiasco, the fallout from Nathan and Rachel's public humiliation was swift and merciless. The news of their deceit and embezzlement spread like wildfire, tarnishing their reputations beyond repair. Both of them faced legal repercussions, and their professional lives crumbled. Watching from the sidelines, I felt a sense of closure. Their comeuppance, long overdue, had finally arrived. One evening, Lisa and I sat in my living room, the events of the past month a frequent topic of our conversations. "You know, Emily, I never thought I'd say this, but I think you got your revenge and then some," Lisa said, sipping her coffee. "It wasn't just about revenge, Lisa," I replied, gazing out the window. "It was about standing up for myself. For too long, I let them control my life, my emotions. Not anymore." Lisa nodded, understanding in her eyes. "So, what's next for you?" I smiled, a sense of hope filling me. "I've started writing again. It's been a long time since I felt this inspired, and I've been applying for new jobs. It's time for a fresh start." Lisa's smile mirrored my own. "That's the spirit. You know, I've always believed in you, Emily. You're stronger than you think." Yet the conversation drifted to lighter topics, but my mind was already miles ahead, planning my future. The incident with Nathan and Rachel had been a harsh lesson, but it had also reignited a fire within me. I was no longer the person who could be easily broken by the words and actions of others. A few days later, I received an unexpected call. It was from a publishing house where I had submitted a manuscript months ago. "Miss Emily, we loved your submission. We'd like to discuss publishing your book," the voice on the other end said. My heart leapt. After years of self-doubt and setbacks, my dream was finally becoming a reality. It felt like a sign, a confirmation that I was on the right path. Life, once a tumultuous sea, had now calmed. Nathan and Rachel had become distant memories, their impact on my life diminishing with each passing day. In their downfall, I had found my strength, my voice. As I sat down to write, words flowed from me like a river. My experiences, though painful, had given me a wealth of inspiration. I wrote not out of spite, but out of a newfound understanding of myself and the world around me. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had led me to this moment, a moment of peace, of self-realization. Nathan and Rachel's betrayal had been a catalyst for change, pushing me to stand up for myself and pursue my dreams. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on. For I was Emily, a survivor, a dreamer, a writer reborn from the ashes of my past. The room was cold, not just in temperature, but in the chill of betrayal that hung in the air. I, Evelyn, sat numbly at the oak table, my hands trembling slightly as the lawyer, Mr. Thompson, read aloud the will of my late father. Martin, my husband of over 30 years, stood beside me, his eyes greedily scanning the document. Linda, my brother David's wife, sat across from us, her face poorly concealing a smirk. The entire estate, valued at approximately $100 million, will be inherited by David, the eldest son, Mr. Thompson announced in a matter-of-fact tone. My heart sank. But how can this be? I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. My gaze fell upon the will, the words blurring as tears welled in my eyes. I had endured Martin's cold indifference and harsh words for years, clinging to the hope that my father's inheritance would be my ticket to freedom. Martin scoffed. Well, this settles it, Evelyn. Your dramatic fantasies of independence are over. Linda chimed in, her voice dripping with false sympathy. It's such a shame, Evelyn, but we must respect your father's wishes. Their words cut through me. My father, who I had cared for tirelessly, couldn't have left me with nothing. It didn't make sense. I need to see that will, I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. As Mr. Thompson handed me the document, I scanned it desperately. My father's signature was at the bottom, seemingly authentic. A wave of despair washed over me. Had my own father really forsaken me like this? You can bring in a handwriting expert if you don't believe it, Martin said, his voice laced with condescension. But it won't change the facts. I looked up, meeting his cold gaze. I will, I said firmly. There has to be a mistake. As I left the room, the weight of my shattered hopes bore down on me. I had dedicated my life to caring for my father and enduring Martin's emotional abuse. Now it seemed I was left with nothing but a broken heart and a life I desperately wanted to escape. That night, alone in the darkness of my room, I made a silent vow. I would not let this injustice stand. I would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. The fight for my rightful inheritance had just begun. The following days were a blur of determined action amidst a storm of emotions. Evelyn, contacted a renowned handwriting expert, Mr. Clarkson, clinging to the hope that my father's will was a forgery. My heart raced as I sat in Mr. Clarkson's office, the will laid out before him. He examined it meticulously, his brow furrowed in concentration. Moments stretched into eternity as I awaited his verdict. Finally, he looked up, his expression solemn. I'm sorry, Mrs. Evelyn, he said gently. The handwriting matches your father's. The will is authentic. The room spun around me as his words sank in. Authentic? How could it be? Despair gripped me, threatening to pull me under. But then a spark of anger ignited within me. This wasn't just about money. It was about my father's legacy, about justice. I thanked Mr. Clarkson and left, my mind racing. If the will was indeed my father's doing, why would he disinherit me? And why did Martin and Linda seem so unsurprisingly content with the outcome? Determined to find answers, I called David. He had been strangely silent since the will's reading. David, it's Evelyn. We need to talk about Dad's will, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause before David replied. I've been meaning to call you, Evelyn. I'm just as shocked as you are. Let's meet tomorrow. The next day, at a quiet cafe, David's face was a mask of confusion and concern. He listened intently as I shared my doubts and the expert's confirmation. I can't believe Dad would do this. David murmured, shaking his head. It doesn't add up. Something feels off, I insisted. Martin and Linda, their reactions were too calculated. David's eyes narrowed. You think they're involved? I don't know, but I intend to find out, I declared. David, we need to dig deeper. There's more to this than meets the eye. David nodded, a resolute expression forming on his face. I'll support you, Evelyn. Let's uncover the truth together. That evening, I lay in bed, my thoughts a whirlwind. The truth was out there, hidden beneath layers of deceit. Martin and Linda would not get away with this. I would fight for what was rightfully mine, for my dignity, for justice. This was no longer just about inheritance. It was a battle for my very soul, and I was ready to wage war. The next few days were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and whispered phone calls. David had hired a private investigator, Mr. Green, to delve into Linda's recent activities. We were both desperate for any shred of evidence that could shed light on the situation. In my kitchen, under the harsh fluorescent light, David and I huddled over Mr. Green's preliminary report. My heart pounded as David read aloud. According to this, Linda has been making frequent secretive visits to a downtown law office, David said, his brow furrowed. A law office? I echoed, a sense of foreboding washing over me. And there's more, David continued, his voice hardening. She's been seen with Martin on several occasions outside of family gatherings. I felt a chill run down my spine. Martin and Linda? What were they up to? The pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place, but the emerging picture was one I dreaded. We need to confront them, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. David placed a hand on my shoulder, his gaze firm. We will, Evelyn, but we need more evidence first. We can't tip our hand too soon. He was right, of course. We had to be strategic, but the waiting, the not knowing was excruciating. In the meantime, David advised me to claim my statutory share of the inheritance. Even if Dad's will is legitimate, you're still entitled to a portion of the estate, he explained. I hesitated. The idea of accepting even a fraction of what I felt was rightfully mine left a bitter taste in my mouth. But David was insistent. It's your right, Evelyn, and it might give us more leverage in finding out what's really going on. So, with a heavy heart, I agreed. I would claim the family home and land, valued at $10 million. It was a far cry from the $50 million I had hoped for, but it was something. A few days later, we confronted Martin and Linda. Their reactions were as cold and calculated as ever. The decision has been made, Evelyn. Don't stir up trouble now, Martin said, his voice dripping with disdain. Linda echoed his sentiment, her eyes glinting with malice. Really, Evelyn, you should be grateful for what you're getting. I clenched my fists, struggling to maintain my composure. Their smug arrogance was infuriating, but I knew I had to play the long game. Don't worry, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I'll get what's rightfully mine. As I left the room, their laughter echoed behind me, mocking and cruel, but it only fueled my determination. I would have my revenge, and they would pay for their treachery. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight. The days following our confrontation were tense. I could feel Martin's and Linda's mocking glares at every turn, but I refused to be cowed. David and I were patient, biding our time as Mr. Green continued his investigation. Then, one rainy afternoon, David called me with a voice trembling with suppressed excitement. Evelyn, you need to come over. We've found something. I rushed to his house, heart pounding with anticipation. David greeted me with a folder in his hands, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and triumph. Look at this, he said, spreading out a series of documents on the dining table. Dad made another will, years ago. It was never revoked. My hands shook as I read the older will. It was a stark contrast to the recent one. This document left 3/4 of the estate to me and 1/4 to David. There it was, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. But why? I whispered, tears of relief and confusion mingling. David's jaw clenched. I think Dad knew something might happen. He was protecting us. The room felt suddenly colder as the implications sank in. Our father had foreseen the possibility of deceit and betrayal. We need to expose Martin and Linda, I said, a newfound resolve stealing my voice. David nodded, a determined glint in his eye. We will, and we have the perfect opportunity. The following week, we called for a family meeting under the pretense of discussing the estate. Martin and Linda arrived, smug smiles plastered on their faces, unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. As they settled in, David began, his voice calm but commanding. Before we proceed, there's something you both should see. He laid out the older will for them to see. The color drained from Linda's face, while Martin's eyes widened in shock. This can't be real, Linda stammered. It's as real as it gets, David said coldly. Notarized and everything. Martin's face contorted with rage. You're trying to swindle us out of our rightful inheritance. I stood up, facing them both. No, Martin, you're the one who's been trying to swindle me. You and Linda. But it's over now. Linda's composure crumbled, her voice rising in panic. But the stocks, the money, it's supposed to be ours. David leaned in, his voice icy. You were so busy plotting, you didn't see the bigger picture. The majority of the estate's value is worthless now. The real value lies in the real estate, which, according to the legal will, goes mostly to Evelyn. The realization hit them like a physical blow. Martin's face turned a shade of purple, while Linda seemed to shrink in her seat. This isn't the end, Martin hissed. We'll fight this. Go ahead, I said, my voice steady. But remember, we have evidence of your deceit, and we're not afraid to use it. As they left, their defeat was palpable. The tables had turned, and justice, though delayed, was finally within my grasp. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The revelation of the older will sent shockwaves through our small family circle. Martin and Linda, once arrogant and unassailable, now seemed like cornered animals, desperate and dangerous. In the days that followed, David and I prepared for the inevitable legal battle. We armed ourselves with the best lawyers, ready to defend the truth of the older will. But as we strategized, an unexpected twist unfolded. David received a call from Mr. Green, our private investigator. His voice was grave. I've uncovered something you both need to see. We met in David's study, the rain pattering against the window pane setting a somber mood. Mr. Green laid out a series of photographs and documents on the desk. They depicted Martin and Linda in various clandestine meetings, their body language intimate, betraying an affair. I felt a nauseating mix of disgust and vindication. So it was them all along, I muttered. David's face hardened. They've been playing us for fools, but they won't get away with it. The final blow came when Mr. Green revealed the extent of the estate's devaluation. The stocks, once the backbone of the inheritance, were practically worthless. The real estate, my portion according to the older will, was the only asset of significant value. Armed with this knowledge, we confronted Martin and Linda at the lawyer's office. Their faces, once smug, were now masks of anxiety and fear. Seems like your little plan backfired, David said coldly. Martin's face turned a deep shade of red. This is nonsense. Those stocks are worth millions. Not anymore, I interjected, relishing the moment. Your greed has led you to a dead end. And let's not forget the affair. Linda's face crumbled, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's not what it looks like. We were just what? I snapped. Conspiring? Betraying? You're both despicable. The lawyer cleared his throat. Given these revelations, we need to revisit the terms of the inheritance. Martin was seething. You can't do this. We'll take this to court. Go ahead, David said calmly. But remember, we have all the evidence we need to expose your lies and your affair. Think carefully about your next move. Defeated and humiliated, Martin and Linda had no choice but to accept the terms of the older will. They left the office, their dreams of wealth shattered. As I watched them go, a sense of deep satisfaction filled me. They had tried to destroy me, but in the end, karma had struck with a vengeance. My fight was over, and justice, though long delayed, was finally mine. The days following our victory were filled with a mix of relief and surreal disbelief. I had triumphed against those who sought to crush me underfoot. As I stood in the now legally mine family home, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years. David and I, along with our lawyers, finalized the legal proceedings. Martin and Linda were left with little more than their shame and regret. The news of their affair and deceit spread, tarnishing their reputations irreparably. One afternoon, as I was arranging some of my father's belongings, David came to visit. He looked lighter, almost carefree, a stark contrast to the burdened man he had been during our ordeal. Evelyn, I've been thinking, he began, a soft smile on his face. This house, it's always been a place of family, of togetherness. It's only right that it continues to be so. I nodded, understanding his sentiment. It's a big house, full of memories. It should be filled with life, with joy. That's why I've decided to move back here with you, David said warmly. After everything, I think it's what Dad would have wanted. The idea of living with David, of rebuilding our family bond in the home we grew up in, filled me with happiness. I'd like that very much, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. In the following weeks, we transformed the house. We repaired what had been neglected, revitalized the gardens, and filled the rooms with laughter and warmth. The house, once a symbol of my imprisonment, was now a beacon of hope and renewal. As for Martin, his affair with Linda led to his downfall. His once prominent career crumbled as colleagues and friends distanced themselves. Linda, too, found herself isolated, her manipulative nature exposed for all to see. I, on the other hand, embraced my newfound freedom. I started hosting community events, inviting neighbors and friends to share in the joy of my home. The house became a hub of activity, a place where people came together, just as David and I had envisioned. In time, I also began a small business, using my skills and experiences to empower other women who had faced similar struggles. My story, once a tale of sorrow and oppression, became one of resilience and strength. As I sat in the garden one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I reflected on my journey. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice, it had all led me to this moment of peace. I had lost much, but in the end I had gained something far more valuable: my freedom, my dignity, and a chance to start anew. The darkness of my past was behind me, and ahead lay a future bright with possibility. Gripping my swollen belly, I fought through another wave of pain, trying to focus on my breathing. The back seat of our car felt like a prison, confining me with my escalating fear and discomfort. Nathan, my husband, was driving, his face a blend of worry and urgency. "We're close, Laura," he reassured me, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. I wanted to believe him, to find solace in his words, but the pain was overwhelming. Suddenly his phone rang, shattering the tense silence. I watched Nathan's expression shift from concern to confusion, then to something I couldn't quite understand. "It's Vanessa," he said, his voice tense as he answered the call. My heart sank at the mention of his sister, a constant source of tension in our marriage. "What? Right now?" Nathan's tone was incredulous. "But Laura's in labor, Vanessa." I strained to hear more, but Vanessa's voice was just a shrill echo. A sense of dread washed over me, the pain of my contractions intensifying with my growing anxiety. Nathan hung up abruptly and pulled the car over. "Laura, I need to help Vanessa. She's stranded at the station. Her car's broken down. She's panicking." "But what about the hospital?" My voice was barely a whisper, laced with disbelief and fear. "I'm about to give birth, Nathan." "I know, but you can call an ambulance. They'll get you there faster. Vanessa's alone and she's freaking out," he insisted. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was he seriously choosing Vanessa over me, over our unborn child, at a moment like this? "Nathan, please." "I need you," I begged, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. He avoided my gaze, looking out of the window. "I'm sorry, Laura. I have to do this. Just call 911, okay? They'll take care of you." With shaky hands, I dialed the emergency number as he helped me out of the car. The cold air hit me, and I felt a chilling sense of abandonment. Watching Nathan drive away, I was alone, the ambulance's distant siren the only sign of incoming help. Tears mixed with the pain of my contractions, but it was the sting of betrayal that cut the deepest. How could he choose Vanessa over us at such a critical time? Lying in the ambulance, my mind raced with hurt and disbelief. The paramedics' voices faded into the background as I tried to comprehend Nathan's decision. He had left me at my most vulnerable for his sister. As the hospital came into view, one thing became clear. Something fundamental in our marriage had shifted. The pain of betrayal was as sharp as the labor pains, marking the start of a journey I never expected to take. Lying in the hospital bed, cradling my newborn son, I should have been overwhelmed with joy. But the memory of Nathan's betrayal lingered like a dark cloud. Holding my baby, I couldn't help but reflect on the past, the signs I had ignored about Nathan and his family, particularly Vanessa. Vanessa had always been the center of attention in their family. I remember our wedding day vividly. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but Vanessa managed to turn it into a spectacle about herself. She arrived in a flamboyant white dress, stealing the spotlight, her smug smile indicating she relished every moment of it. "Isn't white usually reserved for the bride?" I had whispered to Nathan, trying to hide my irritation. Nathan had just shrugged, a passive response that had become all too familiar. "That's just how Vanessa is. Don't let it get to you." But it did get to me. Her behavior at our wedding was just a preview of the years to come. Whenever there was an opportunity to overshadow or undermine me, Vanessa seized it, with Nathan either oblivious or indifferent. I thought back to the countless family dinners where Vanessa would dominate the conversation, turning every topic back to herself. Nathan's parents watched passively, never intervening. I used to wonder if they were intimidated by her or simply chose to turn a blind eye. Vanessa, maybe Laura has something she'd like to share, I once suggested during a dinner where Vanessa was ranting about her latest job drama. Vanessa had shot me a withering look. Oh, please, what could possibly be more interesting than my disastrous day? Nathan had chuckled, dismissing my attempt to redirect the conversation. Let her talk, Laura. You know how she loves the drama. I used to think Nathan was just being a protective brother, but as time went on, his lack of support became more apparent. It wasn't just about being protective, it was about choosing Vanessa over me, every time. Now, as I looked down at my son, I realized how much I had tolerated, all in the name of keeping peace. Nathan's abandonment at the hospital was not just a singular act of betrayal, it was the culmination of years of being second to his sister. A knock on the hospital room door snapped me back to the present. It was my parents, their faces etched with concern and love. As they cooed over their grandson, I felt a surge of strength. I wasn't alone. I had my son, and I had my family who truly cared. This is just the beginning, Laura, my dad said, his hand gently squeezing mine. You're stronger than you know. As they left, promising to come back with anything I needed, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Nathan and Vanessa dictate my life any longer. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. My son needed a mother who could stand up for herself, and I was determined to be just that. A few months before the birth of my son, I was supervising a field trip to the local science museum with my second-grade class. It was a responsibility I always took seriously, ensuring each child's safety and enjoyment. As I ushered the excited children towards the planetarium, my phone vibrated incessantly in my bag. An unknown number flashed on the screen. I silenced it, not wanting any distractions. After the show, as the kids explored the exhibits with the museum staff, I finally checked my phone. The unknown number had left several missed calls, eventually replaced by Nathan's number. My heart sank. Had something happened? Stepping aside, I called Nathan back, only to be greeted by his frantic voice. Laura, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you. I'm on a field trip, Nathan. What's wrong? I replied, anxiety building in my voice. It's Vanessa, he said hurriedly. There's a surprise concert by her favorite idol at the park, and they're selling limited edition autographed photos. You need to get her one. I was stunned. Nathan, I'm working. I can't just leave. You don't understand, Laura. She's really upset. You're close by. Just go and get it, he pressed. The audacity of his request left me speechless. Here I was, responsible for 20 children, and Nathan expected me to abandon them for a frivolous errand? Nathan, no, I'm not leaving. I have a duty here, I said firmly. There was a pause on the other end. You're being selfish, Laura. This means a lot to Vanessa. His words stung, but I stood my ground. No, Nathan, my students come first. He hung up abruptly, his last words echoing in my mind. The rest of the field trip passed in a blur. I was there physically, but mentally I was grappling with the realization of how little Nathan respected my career and responsibilities. When I returned home, the house was eerily silent. Nathan was nowhere to be found. There was a note on the kitchen table, gone to my parents' house. That night, as I lay in bed, alone, my mind raced. Nathan's demand was not just unreasonable, it was disrespectful. It was a clear message that Vanessa's whims were more important than my professional obligations. That incident was a turning point for me, a moment when the veil lifted, and I saw Nathan's true priorities. As I drifted off to sleep, I knew things had to change. I couldn't continue living in the shadow of Vanessa's needs and Nathan's inability to see beyond them. I had to stand up for myself, for my dignity. Little did I know that this resolve would soon be tested in the most unimaginable way. The confrontation at Nathan's parents' house a few weeks later marked the tipping point for me. I had walked the 15 minutes there, still processing Nathan's abrupt departure from our home. As I entered, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Nathan, Vanessa, and their parents were all there. their expressions ranging from apologetic to expectant. Nathan was the first to break the silence. "Laura, you need to apologize to Vanessa." I was taken aback. "Apologize? For what?" Vanessa's voice was sharp, laced with self-pity. "Because of your selfishness, I missed out on the limited edition autographed photo. Do you have any idea how important that was to me?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Vanessa, I was working. I had responsibilities." Vanessa sniffled dramatically, turning to Nathan and their parents for support. "See? She doesn't even care. She ruined my day." Nathan's mother chimed in softly. "Laura, maybe you could just apologize to keep the peace." I felt a surge of frustration. This wasn't about keeping the peace. It was about constantly catering to Vanessa's unreasonable demands. Before I could respond, Vanessa thrust her phone at me, displaying a listing on a flea market app. "Fine, then buy this for me. It's the same photo, only $300. I was stunned. $300 for a photo? Just because I didn't abandon my job for her whims? Nathan nudged me. "Just do it, Laura. It'll make things right." That moment, something inside me snapped. The years of being overshadowed, of having my feelings and career disregarded, boiled to the surface. "No, Nathan, I won't do it," I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. Vanessa gasped. "But you owe me." "I owe you nothing. I've put up with this far too long," I declared, turning to Nathan. "And you're supposed to be my partner, but all you ever do is put Vanessa first. Where does that leave me? Where does that leave us?" Nathan looked stunned, a mix of confusion and defensiveness in his eyes. "But she's my sister." "That's no excuse," I cut him off. "Your sister, your family's antics. I'm done being a part of this drama." With that, I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. The cool evening air felt refreshing against my flushed cheeks. It was a walk of defiance, a statement that I was no longer going to be a pawn in their dysfunctional family dynamic. That night, as I lay in my bed, alone yet empowered, I realized that my marriage to Nathan was a shadow of what it should be. It was time for me to reclaim my life, my dignity, and if that meant going against Nathan and his family, so be it. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it head-on. The discovery of my second pregnancy a few weeks later brought a complex mix of emotions. Joy, fear, and a resolute determination to protect this new life from the toxic environment Nathan and his family created. It was during a routine morning, the nausea hitting harder than usual, that the test confirmed my suspicions. I was pregnant. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, the positive test in my hand, a whirlwind of thoughts swirling through my mind. How would Nathan react? Could I bring another child into this chaos? When I eventually broke the news to Nathan, his reaction was lukewarm, his mind seemingly elsewhere. "That's great, I guess," he said, distractedly scrolling through his phone. I couldn't help but notice Vanessa's name flash across his screen. In the months that followed, Nathan's indifference only grew. He was rarely home, always at his parents' house or running errands for Vanessa. I was left alone, wrestling with the reality of my situation. One evening, as I sat in the living room, surrounded by pregnancy books and ultrasound pictures, Nathan walked in, his expression tense. "We need to talk," he said, sitting across from me. I braced myself, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" "It's about the baby," he began, avoiding eye contact. "Vanessa thinks we should move in with my parents, for extra help." I stared at him, incredulous. "Move in with your parents?" "Nathan, this is our family. We should be making decisions together, not based on what Vanessa wants." Nathan sighed, a hint of frustration in his voice. "You just don't understand, Laura. Vanessa knows best. She's been through a lot." "That's not a good enough reason," I argued. "Our child needs a stable environment, not more of Vanessa's drama." Nathan stood up, his frustration boiling over. "You're being unreasonable, Laura. Vanessa is just trying to help." I shook my head, a sad realization dawning on me. "No, Nathan. You're the one being unreasonable. You're so caught up in Vanessa's world that you can't see what's right in front of you." He didn't respond, storming out of the room instead. That night, as I lay in bed, the distance between Nathan and me felt like a chasm. I knew then that I had to make a decision for the sake of my children and me. In the following weeks, I grew more resolute. I started preparing for a life where Nathan's influence was minimal. I couldn't let Vanessa's shadow loom over my children's lives. I needed to be strong for them and for myself. The day my water broke started like any other, but it quickly turned into the most harrowing experience of my life. As the labor pains began, Nathan scrambled to get me to the hospital. In that moment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he would be there for me when it mattered most. We were halfway to the hospital when Nathan's phone rang. His sister's ringtone. "Don't answer it," I pleaded through gritted teeth, another contraction rippling through me. Nathan hesitated, but ultimately picked up the call. "Hello? Vanessa? What's wrong?" I couldn't believe it. Here I was about to give birth, and he was still prioritizing her. "Sis can't get to her favorite band's concert because of a train incident," he said after a moment, his tone changing. "I need to help her." "Nathan, I'm in labor," I screamed, disbelief and fear mingling in my voice. "I know, but this is important to Vanessa. You can call an ambulance, right?" he said, his voice distressingly calm. I was in shock, unable to process what was happening. "You're choosing her over our baby?" "It's not like that, Laura. Just call 911, Nathan said, pulling over and helping me out of the car, my hospital bag in hand. As he drove off, leaving me alone on the side of the road, I felt a mixture of abandonment, rage, and utter disbelief. How could he do this to me, to his child? Somehow I managed to call an ambulance and get to the hospital. The nurses rushed me into delivery, their faces a blur as I grappled with the pain and shock. Hours later, I held my newborn son, a beautiful, innocent life, unaware of the drama surrounding his arrival. As I looked down at him, my heart swelled with love and a fierce protective instinct. Nathan's betrayal was unforgivable, a clear sign that he would always choose Vanessa over our family. As I lay in the hospital bed, a plan began to form in my mind. Nathan and Vanessa would not get away with this. They needed to face consequences for their actions. I would make sure of it. That night, as my son slept peacefully beside me, I made a vow. I would fight for what was right for my children and me. Nathan and Vanessa had pushed me too far, and it was time for them to understand the gravity of their actions. In the weeks following the birth of my son, my resolve to hold Nathan and Vanessa accountable only strengthened. Their callous disregard for our family could not go unchallenged. I started by seeking legal counsel, determined to divorce Nathan and ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. During my first meeting with the lawyer, I laid out everything: Nathan's financial irresponsibility, his emotional neglect, and the final act of abandonment. The lawyer listened intently, his expression growing more incredulous by the minute. "This is more than just a case of marital discord," he said, shaking his head. "This is abandonment of a spouse in a vulnerable state. We can take this to court." I nodded, feeling a sense of empowerment. It was time Nathan and Vanessa understood the weight of their actions. Meanwhile, Nathan's behavior worsened. He showed up at the hospital, feigning concern, but I saw right through it. It was a performance likely for the benefit of his parents or Vanessa. "Laura, please, let's talk about this," he pleaded, his eyes darting around nervously. "There's nothing to talk about, Nathan. You made your choice," I replied coldly, holding my son protectively. "But Vanessa needed me. You don't understand the pressure she's under," he tried to explain, but I cut him off. "The only pressure here was on me and our newborn son when you abandoned us. I'm filing for divorce, Nathan. You and Vanessa will have to answer for what you've done." Nathan's face paled. "You can't do this, Laura. Think about our family." "Our family?" I laughed bitterly. "You stopped thinking about our family a long time ago." After that encounter, I instructed the hospital staff not to let Nathan or anyone from his family visit. My parents supported me, their disappointment in Nathan palpable. The legal proceedings were grueling but necessary. I presented evidence of Nathan's neglect and abandonment. The court was sympathetic to my case, especially considering the circumstances of his betrayal. The judge granted me a favorable divorce settlement, including full custody of our children and significant alimony and child support. Nathan's face during the verdict was a mix of shock and realization, the reality of his actions finally sinking in. Vanessa, who had accompanied Nathan to court, looked outraged. "This isn't fair. You're ruining our family," she exclaimed. "This is the result of your actions, Vanessa," I said, facing her directly. "You and Nathan have only yourselves to blame." Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had stood up for myself and my children, ensuring that Nathan and Vanessa faced the consequences of their selfishness. It was a hard-won victory, but a necessary step towards rebuilding our lives. With the divorce finalized and Nathan's betrayal squarely behind me, I began to rebuild my life with my children. It was a time of transformation, shedding the remnants of a broken marriage and embracing my new role as a single mother. I returned to teaching, finding solace and purpose in my work. The support of my colleagues and the joy of my students were balm to my soul. My parents were invaluable, helping with the kids while I worked. Their unwavering support made the transition smoother than I had dared to hope. But life wasn't without its challenges. Nathan, seemingly unable to accept the reality of our divorce, attempted to reach out multiple times. His messages ranged from pleading to angrily accusing me of tearing our family apart. Each message was a reminder of the man he had become, a stranger driven by selfishness and manipulation. I maintained a strict no-contact policy, focusing instead on providing a stable, loving home for my children. They were too young to understand the complexities of what had transpired, but they adapted to our new life with a resilience that filled me with pride. One afternoon, as I picked up my son from daycare, his teacher pulled me aside. "Laura, there's a man outside asking about you. He says he's your husband." My heart sank. Nathan. Despite everything, he still wouldn't let go. I instructed the teacher to not let him in and to call the police if he didn't leave. As I drove home, my son chatting happily in the back seat, I realized the lengths I would go to protect my children from Nathan's toxic influence. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the shadow of Nathan and Vanessa began to fade from our lives. I found strength in my independence, a sense of peace in the life I was rebuilding. But revenge, as it turns out, wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. It was exhausting, a constant drain on my emotions and energy. The satisfaction of seeing Nathan and Vanessa face consequences was overshadowed by the need to move on, to leave the bitterness behind. So I chose to let go, to focus on the present and the future. My children deserved a mother who was present, not one consumed by the past. We had a whole life ahead of us, full of possibilities and new beginnings. As I tucked my son into bed that night, his little arms wrapped around my neck, I knew I had made the right decision. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought us to a place of love, stability, and hope, and that was worth more than any revenge. My name is Abigail, and at 34, I had thought that marrying Martin, the kind 36-year-old manager of a local home improvement store, would signal the dawn of a rejuvenating chapter in my life. The world had felt like a promise, a tender possibility wrapped up in vows and the soft smile he gave me when he asked me to be his wife. When we got married, Martin moved out of his parents' house to join me in the 3-bedroom apartment I decided to take the plunge and purchase. It wasn't in the heart of the city, and it certainly wasn't a penthouse in some glossy luxury high-rise, yet it was perfect for us. The place was still fairly new, just 2 years old, affordable and comfortable. Martin never had opulent tastes anyway, or so I thought. As we both juggled our busy work schedules in the early days of move-in excitement, we soon found a delicate balance that allowed us to synchronize our days off. We even started planning our honeymoon, a delightful topic that often found its way into our evenings, filling the air with a kind of charged hope. Those were moments when gladness blossomed straightforwardly within me. I was truly glad I married Martin. But, like the slow pull of threads from a favorite sweater, the atmosphere in our new home began to unravel. "My mother and sister want to come over to see our new home tomorrow, so I've invited them," Martin revealed one evening, nonchalantly breaking the news as if it were as common as commenting on the weather. I felt a flicker of annoyance at his failure to discuss the date with me first, and responded, "But tomorrow is your day off, Martin. I have to work. Didn't you think to ask me?" He dismissed it with a wave, proclaiming it was fine since they'd only be looking around the house, and I relented. Little did I know that the light of the next day would cast shadows on my trust in Martin's decisive character. The evening following Martin's family visit, I returned home after a long day at the university medical office to an unexpected symphony of laughter and clinking glasses. A pleasant aroma wafted from the living room, smells that promised a banquet I hadn't planned for. Stepping into the cluttered room, my eyes met the jovial faces of Martin, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, whose merrymaking unfolded around a table that groaned under the weight of food and drink. What's going on? I could hardly conceal my dismay. My mother-in-law raised her glass in a woozy toast, her greeting laced with good cheer, but devoid of awareness. "Oh, Abigail, you're home. Done with work?" She didn't notice the tension knitting my brow. My sister-in-law, more astute, attempted to disarm me with empathy even as she indulged in snacks. "Hey, Abigail, you must be tired. But isn't this place amazing?" Her comment concealed a probing fork. It was clear where the food had come from. Martin, my husband, was complicit in their casual plunder of our larder, shrugging off my question about dinner with the simplicity of a man who hasn't had to negotiate boundaries within his own home. They had time, so why not dinner? He said with a smile that would normally tug at my heart, if not for the simmering discontent within me. The situation began to dawn on me like a cold sunrise. They were using our groceries. The thought threatened to curdle the last reserves of my calm. The alcohol, the high-quality meats we took pains to select, even the snacks my sister-in-law treated herself to, they all came from our provisions. Their brazenness crested when my mother-in-law, perhaps emboldened by the wine, exclaimed with a mighty laugh, "If you have so much in the fridge, there's no need to add more. Who wants that hassle?" She declared it as though it was her right, unsettling me deep to my core. I could only muster a strained smile and a resolve to retreat. "I'll just take care of my portion, then." The response was feigned cooperation. I wasn't going to unravel at the seams. Not yet. But as I turned toward my room, the door slammed, a little louder than intended. The noise was an accidental cannonade, signaling an internal battle they couldn't possibly perceive. From behind the closed door, their whispers were just coherent enough to prick at my dignity. "Is she always this rough? Will she break something in such a nice house?" Martin's agreeable voice endeavored to calm the waters. "She's tired from work, that's all." I laid awake that night, the events of the evening playing in my mind like a discordant melody. Was this a one-off occurrence, or a herald of things to come? What next? The awaited honeymoon in Alaska seemed both a balm and a distant dream. As our honeymoon drew closer, the anticipation of Alaska's allure seemed to patch up the frayed edges of discontent that had threatened to spread within me. I clung to the belief that our getaways, just Martin and me, would keep the reality of domestic tension at bay. Our 3 nights in Alaska melded into the kind of perfection seldom found outside glossy travel brochures. We soaked in hot springs, marveled at the auroras, and indulged in local cuisine, ensuring our days were enshrined in joyful memories. Amidst this temporary escape, life was an untroubled stream, and with every reflection of the northern lights in Martin's eyes, I felt a flicker of the ease we'd shared before. Returning home, riding on the quiet high of our short-lived isolation, I was jerked back to reality with a troubling afterthought. "Did I lock the bathroom window?" I asked aloud, a distant concern since we lived on the 4th floor of an apartment that seemed secure against the world. "It'll be fine," Martin nonchalantly assured me. "My mother and sister are there." The words struck me like a bucket of ice water. "What? Why are they at our place?" I kept my voice as steady as possible, masking the rise of anxiety. "Oh, didn't I tell you?" He was the picture of equanimity as he explained they were to clean while we were away. Left unsaid was that he'd lent them our keys, deciding yet again without my input that our home was theirs to occupy as they pleased. I spent the rest of the journey stewing in silence. When we walked through the door, the scene before us eclipsed my worst imaginings. Another unauthorized festivity unfolded, surrounded by bags that suggested a more permanent stay. "Oh, you're back? Did you enjoy your trip?" My mother-in-law greeted us, her casualness an aggravating buzz in my ears. The anger in me begged for release. It seared through my veins, fueling a confrontation I'd long sought to avoid. "Enough, what are you doing? Please go home. This is our house." The words erupted from me, a volcanic plea for them to recognize the sanctity of our space. My mother-in-law, tipsy from both alcohol and audacity, came back with a scorching retort. "This is Martin's house, so there's no problem with whatever we, his family, do." Her daughter was quick to add to the conflagration, "We should have more right to be here than you." The injustice of their words was the spark that set my restraint ablaze. I pay for this home, too. My voice was an unfamiliar battle cry as I claimed my ground. Then came Martin's voice, trying and failing to douse the flames. Hey, Abigail, don't talk to my family like that. We're all going to live here. The fighting words hung in the air, a challenge thrown down without my consent. And what about me, Martin? When did I lose my say? He shook his head, dispensing the final blow coldly. If you hate it so much, you can leave. There, in the heart of the battlefield, his directive became the banner under which I chose to walk away. I left with the knowledge that there was no turning back. The path forward was lonely but liberating. My days unfolded away from Martin and his family. They took their shape as I filed for divorce, sought counsel, and found solace in new beginnings. His world receded, a tale of 2 months told in unanswered calls and sent straight to voicemail. The day came when Martin's voice broke through the barrier, the desperation evident even through the receiver. "Faye, what are you doing? Come back now," he pleaded. His panic hinted at underlying currents I hadn't directly witnessed but recognized. The careful facade he held, the financial stability that was more mine than his. "I'm broke," he confessed. "I'm drowning in debt." The truth of our married life was laid bare. Without my substantial contributions, he was left to flounder in a reality he couldn't afford, compounded by the excessive spending habits of his jobless relatives. The anger that Martin's situation sparked within me was a distant ember by the time the divorce papers arrived. It was time to confront the final chapter of our shared story. The day I returned to the apartment to gather my remaining belongings, I felt the weight of finality. Martin, pale-faced and anxious, attempted to salvage the shards of our fragmented life. "Faye, you really saved me," he said weakly, a man grasping at straws. "I'm already $10,000 in debt. Without you, it will only get worse." I could only manage a wry smile. The absurdity of the situation was almost laughable, if it hadn't been so pathetically sad. "Then maybe it's time for your mother and sister to start working. 3 incomes are better than 1, I suggested, a mixture of genuine advice and exasperated retort. The suggestion landed like a boulder in a still pond. "Aren't you going to help us out?" Martin's disbelief was palpable, the expectation that I would continue to be their financial lifeline etched in every line of his face. The clarity of my resolve cut through the heaviness of the room. "Why should I pay for your living expenses? It's your responsibility now. I said I'd consider helping, but I can't support those who won't even try to support themselves." Their protests were white noise as I focused on the practicalities, packing my belongings, signing documents, pulling away from a shared life that no longer recognized me as a part of it. "Good luck," was all I could muster as I closed the door for the last time and drove away. Months dissolved into a past life, and I felt my world expand in ways I hadn't imagined while tethered to Martin's sinking ship. The money that once evaporated into an endless well now funded my passions and travels. My work at the medical office was invigorated, no longer a means to an end but a joy in itself. Then there was the doctor, the one who had lent a sympathetic ear through the tumultuous times. "You're really glowing recently, Abigail." His compliment was a bright note in a melody that had regained its harmony. Before long, we found ourselves entwined in a dance that was all new steps and laughter, my heart rediscovering its rhythm. In the company of this man who saw me, not the overstretched savior of a wayward family, but simply Abigail, I was rejuvenated. Martin's plight was a distant echo by then, a cautionary tale whispered by the wind. Though I sometimes wondered if he and his family had found their footing, I knew any compassion I felt was reserved for a version of them that had ceased to exist the day I chose myself over their chaos. Moving forward, life was full of possibility, an open book where every page was mine to write, unmarred by obligation or unwelcome intrusion. It was liberating, joyous, and wonderfully mine. In the dim light of our modest kitchen, the words cut through the silence like a knife. "This food is garbage, Eliza. Can't you do anything right?" Marcus sneered, his eyes cold and dismissive. I bit my lip, stifling a retort. The last thing I wanted was to escalate the tension, especially with Lydia and Robert, his ailing parents, in the next room. "My name is Eliza. I'm 36, and I've been tethered to this loveless marriage for 5 agonizing years. We met at a community event. I was 31 and Marcus was 33. After losing my parents in a tragic accident, I was a lone ship adrift at sea. Marcus, with his charming facade, seemed like a safe harbor, but that facade crumbled quickly after our wedding. The early days were a whirlwind. Marcus rushed the relationship, eager to wear the badge of marriage like his friends. 6 months into dating, and we were already discussing wedding plans. His parents, Lydia and Robert, welcomed me with open arms, filling the void left by my own parents' passing. Lydia, with her gentle smile, helped me with the wedding preparations. I was more than willing to live with them after the marriage, grateful for their warmth. "Eliza, your coffee is the only decent thing in this house," Marcus's father, Robert, would often say. My father was a coffee connoisseur, and his love for it had rubbed off on me. Blending my own beans became a comforting ritual, a connection to my past. Robert's appreciation for my coffee was a balm to my soul, reminding me of happier times with my father. Marcus, however, couldn't care less. He would often remark that instant coffee tasted better than anything I brewed. His indifference wasn't just limited to coffee, it extended to everything I did. Lydia, on the other hand, shared my passion for cooking. "I've always dreamt of cooking with a daughter," she would say, her eyes sparkling with joy. Cooking with her was a respite from the constant Cold War with Marcus. Life took a harsh turn 2 years ago when Lydia fell ill. Though not bedridden, her health required frequent rest. I stepped up, taking care of her as best I could. Marcus's contribution? Increased hours at work and a constant barrage of complaints about the gloomy atmosphere at home. Then came the bombshell. I found lipstick on Marcus's shirt, a perfume scent I didn't recognize. Confronted, he admitted to an affair. He blamed it on the depressing home environment and his need to escape. I was stunned, not just by his betrayal, but by his brazen lack of remorse. Robert was furious when he found out. He reprimanded Marcus, who seemed repentant at the time. I chose not to divorce him, not out of love, but out of concern for Lydia. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving her in Marcus's uncaring hands. But the real shock came on the day of Robert's retirement. Marcus's fixation on his father's pension was disgusting. His sense of entitlement boiled over when he learned that there was no inheritance for him. The subsequent verbal abuse intensified, revealing the full extent of his vile nature. Marcus started working even more overtime, likely a cover for his continued infidelity. I found myself trapped, unable to leave for fear of what would happen to Lydia and Robert. Marcus's parents were kinder to me than he ever was, and the thought of abandoning them was unbearable. "Eliza, you're just a glorified maid," Marcus spat out one evening, his words dripping with contempt. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I swallowed them back. I had to stay strong, for Lydia and Robert's sake. But with each passing day, my resolve wavered. How much longer could I endure this living nightmare? The days melted into each other, each as gray and unremarkable as the one before. Lydia's health was deteriorating, and I found myself more nurse than daughter-in-law. Marcus was hardly ever home, and when he was, his presence was like a dark cloud looming over the house. "I don't know why you bother, Eliza," Marcus sneered one evening as I prepared Lydia's medication. "She's just a burden now. We should have put her in a home." I clenched my jaw, the pill bottle in my hand trembling. "She's your mother, Marcus. How can you say such things?" I shot back, my voice laced with disbelief. He shrugged, an ugly smirk playing on his lips. "Why not? It's the truth. And let's not forget dear old Dad, another dead weight." I turned away, hiding the tears that threatened to spill. Lydia's soft voice called out from the other room. "Is everything all right, Eliza?" "Yes, Lydia. Just a moment," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. The betrayal stung deeper each day. Marcus's affair was an open secret now. He didn't even bother to hide it. The lipstick stains, the late nights, the careless whispers on the phone, it was all a blatant display of his infidelity. One particularly harsh evening, as I served dinner, Marcus looked at me with disdain. "You know, I met someone interesting today," he began, his words dripping with malice. "Someone young, vibrant. Not like some people who just wither away at home." I set down the plates, my hands shaking. "Are you trying to hurt me, Marcus? Is that your goal?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned back, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Maybe. It's fun to see you squirm. You're so pathetic, clinging to this sham of a marriage. I recoiled, as if struck. His words were like venom, poisoning the already tainted air between us. I excused myself quickly, retreating to Lydia's room, where her kind eyes and warm smile offered a small comfort. As I sat by Lydia's bedside, reading to her, Marcus's words echoed in my mind. Was I really just clinging to a hopeless situation? The reality of my life, bound to a man who saw me as nothing more than a caretaker for his parents, hit me hard. I felt trapped, caught in a web of duty and misplaced loyalty. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't continue like this. Something had to change. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, a spark of hope flickered within me. I would find a way out of this nightmare, not just for myself, but for Lydia and Robert too. The thought of revenge against Marcus, a man who had shown nothing but cruelty, brought a bitter smile to my lips. The game was about to change, and this time I would be the one in control. The winter chill seeped into the house, but it was nothing compared to the icy atmosphere Marcus created every time he walked in. The tension was palpable, a constant reminder of the career my life had become. "Eliza, when are you going to learn to cook something decent?" Marcus scoffed one evening, pushing his plate away in disgust. "You're as useless in the kitchen as you are in everything else." I bristled at his words, my hands clenching into fists under the table. "I'm doing the best I can, Marcus. If you're so dissatisfied, why don't you cook for yourself?" I retorted, my patience wearing thin. He laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Me, cook? That's your job. You're the wife, after all. Or have you forgotten your place?" I bit back a sharp reply, knowing it would only fuel his cruelty. Instead, I cleared the dishes in silence, my mind racing. His constant belittlement was unbearable. I needed to escape. But how? Later that week, I overheard Marcus on a call. His hushed tones were filled with excitement. "Yeah, I'll be there. Can't wait to see you," he whispered, unaware that I was listening from the hallway. The revelation stung, but it wasn't a surprise. His affair wasn't just a fling, it was ongoing. The knowledge solidified my resolve. I couldn't let this man control my life any longer. The next day, I confided in Lydia, pouring out my heart. Her eyes filled with tears as she listened. "Oh, Eliza, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this. You've been nothing but a blessing to us." Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. "I can't stay here, Lydia. Not with Marcus. I need to find a way out," I said, determination stealing my voice. Lydia nodded, her hand gripping mine. "I understand, dear. You have to do what's best for you. Don't worry about us. We'll manage." But the thought of leaving them in Marcus's uncaring hands gnawed at me. I needed a plan, one that would ensure their safety and give me the freedom I so desperately craved. That evening, as I lay in bed, a plan began to take shape. I would gather evidence of Marcus's infidelity, his neglect, his cruelty. I would build a case so strong that he would have no choice but to let me go, and perhaps even ensure some financial security for Lydia and Robert. The thought of turning the tables on Marcus, of making him pay for his actions, filled me with a sense of purpose. I started documenting everything. The late nights, the phone calls, the derogatory comments. Each piece of evidence was a step towards my liberation. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. Marcus had underestimated me for too long. It was time for him to see just how strong Eliza could be. December arrived, bringing with it a biting cold that mirrored the frostiness in our home. Marcus's indifference had grown into outright disdain, each interaction laced with venom. The holiday season, which should have been filled with warmth and joy, felt hollow and oppressive under his shadow. One evening, as we sat in stony silence, Marcus dropped a bombshell. "I'm going to Hawaii for Christmas with some friends. Can't waste my holidays in this depressing place." I stared at him, disbelief mingling with a rising sense of anger. "You're leaving for Christmas? What about your parents?" "They need us," I protested, my voice tinged with frustration. He shrugged, his indifference cutting deeper than his words. "Not my problem. You're here, aren't you? Besides, I need a break from all this." He gestured around the room, his eyes cold. The injustice of his words stung. Here I was, caring for his parents, managing our home, and he was abandoning us for a holiday. The unfairness of it all burned in my chest. "Who are you going with?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Marcus smirked, a cruel glint in his eyes. That's none of your business. Maybe I'll find someone who actually knows how to have fun. His insinuation was clear, and it cut deep. I felt a mix of hurt and anger, but above all, an overwhelming sense of betrayal. It was obvious he was meeting his mistress. The realization hit me hard. I was truly alone in this. Christmas Eve arrived, and with Marcus gone, the house was quieter, but it wasn't peaceful. Lydia and Robert were saddened by their son's absence, their spirits dampened by his neglect. I tried to lift their mood, decorating the house and preparing a festive meal, but the joy of the season was overshadowed by Marcus's betrayal. As we sat down to dinner, Lydia reached for my hand. "Thank you, Eliza, for everything. We don't know what we'd do without you." I squeezed her hand, fighting back tears. "It's my pleasure. You're my family, too." That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of my situation felt crushing. Marcus's betrayal, his parents' disappointment, my own loneliness, it all bore down on me. But as I lay there, a fierce determination took root within me. I wouldn't let Marcus win. I would fight for a better life, for myself and for Lydia and Robert. They deserved better, and so did I. The new year was approaching, and with it the promise of new beginnings. I would make sure of it. The days following Christmas were a blur of activity and planning. I was determined to change the course of my life. One evening, as I sat with Lydia and Robert discussing the future, an idea began to take shape. "Eliza, we can't let you sacrifice your life for us. You've done more than enough," Lydia said, her voice filled with concern. I shook my head, my resolve firm. "I can't just leave you with Marcus. He doesn't care about anyone but himself." Robert, who had been quiet, spoke up. "We've been thinking, Eliza. Maybe it's time we took matters into our own hands." I looked at them, puzzled. "What do you mean?" They exchanged a glance before Robert continued. "We've been pretending to be more ill than we actually are. We wanted to see how Marcus would react, to truly understand his character." I was stunned. "You mean you're not as sick as you've been letting on?" Lydia nodded. "It's true. We needed to know if Marcus would step up. But he's only shown his true colors, selfish and uncaring. The revelation was shocking, but it sparked an idea. What if we use this to our advantage? What if we turn the tables on Marcus?" Robert and Lydia listened intently as I laid out my plan. We would continue the charade of their illness, building up a case against Marcus for his neglect. We would document everything, his absence, his indifference, his affair. And when the time was right, we would confront him, armed with undeniable evidence of his failures as a son and a husband. The following weeks were a whirlwind of covert planning and careful documentation. Marcus, oblivious in his selfishness, continued his neglectful ways, providing us with all the evidence we needed. Then, one fateful evening, Marcus returned home, his usual sneer in place. "I see the invalids are still sucking the life out of this house," he remarked callously. I bristled at his words, but maintained my composure. "They're your parents, Marcus. They deserve your respect and care." He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Respect? For what? They're nothing but a burden." I locked eyes with him, my voice steady. "You're going to regret those words, Marcus, sooner than you think." His smirk faltered for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by his usual arrogance. "We'll see about that, Eliza." As he walked away, I knew our plan was working. Marcus was unaware of the storm that was brewing, a storm that would soon sweep away the facade of his life, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. The moment of reckoning was close at hand, and I was ready. For Lydia, for Robert, and for myself, I was ready to fight back. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than expected. Marcus, as usual, was oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him. I had gathered enough evidence of his neglect, his affairs, and his utter lack of empathy. Lydia and Robert were ready too, prepared to confront their son with the truth. It was a cold evening when we decided it was time. Marcus walked in, his usual arrogant self, not noticing the tense atmosphere. Lydia, Robert, and I were sitting in the living room, a folder of evidence on the coffee table. "Marcus, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. He rolled his eyes. "What now? More complaints about how hard your life is?" "No," I replied. "It's about how you failed as a son and a husband." He scoffed, but the smirk faded as he noticed the serious expressions on his parents' faces. "What's this about?" he asked, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. "Sit down, Marcus. "It's time you heard some hard truths," Robert said, his voice firm. The confrontation was intense. We laid out everything, the evidence of his affairs, his neglect, and his cruelty. Marcus tried to deny it, but the proof was irrefutable. His facade crumbled, revealing the coward beneath. "You can't do this to me." Marcus stammered, his usual confidence shattered. "You did this to yourself," Lydia said, her voice filled with disappointment. The final blow was when I handed him the divorce papers. "I'm done, Marcus. I deserve better than this, than you." He looked at the papers, then at me, disbelief and panic in his eyes. "You can't leave me. You have nowhere to go. I have myself, and that's enough. I won't be your doormat anymore." Marcus was defeated, his arrogance turned to desperation. But there was no turning back. The truth had set me free, and there was no sympathy left in my heart for him. The next morning Marcus left, his tail between his legs, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. Lydia, Robert, and I watched him go, a sense of relief washing over us. It was over. The years of suffering, the pain, the neglect, it was finally over. I stood there with Lydia and Robert, feeling lighter than I had in years. We had faced the dragon and emerged victorious. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope and the promise of a better tomorrow. In the wake of Marcus's departure, a profound sense of peace settled over the house. Lydia, Robert, and I embarked on a journey of healing, leaving the shadows of the past behind us. The house, once a battlefield of tension and misery, became a sanctuary of warmth and mutual support. One morning, as we enjoyed a quiet breakfast, Lydia broached a subject close to my heart. "Eliza, you always had a dream, didn't you? About opening a cafe?" I smiled, surprised she remembered. "Yes, but that was a long time ago. Life took a different turn." Robert chimed in, his eyes twinkling. "What if we told you that it's still possible, that your dream could become a reality?" I looked at them, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "We've been thinking," Lydia began, her voice filled with excitement. "This house, it's too big for us now. What if we sold it and used the money to help you start your cafe?" The idea was overwhelming. "But what about you? Where will you live?" "That's the best part," Robert said, smiling. "We found a lovely little cottage not far from here. It's perfect for us, and it'll be close to your cafe. We could be your first customers every morning." The idea of reviving my dream, of starting anew with Lydia and Robert's support, filled me with an indescribable joy. The pain and struggle of the past years seemed to dissolve, giving way to a future brimming with possibilities. Over the next few months, we put our plan into action. The house was sold, and the cottage became Lydia and Robert's new home. With their support and the proceeds from the sale, I found the perfect location for my cafe. We poured our hearts into creating a cozy, welcoming space, a reflection of the new life we were building together. On the opening day of the cafe, I stood behind the counter, the aroma of fresh coffee in the air, a sense of accomplishment washing over me. Lydia and Robert were there, beaming with pride. As customers began to trickle in, Lydia squeezed my hand. "You did it, Eliza. You turned your dream into reality." I looked around at the cafe, at Lydia and Robert's smiling faces, and I knew she was right. I had overcome the darkness of my past, and with the support of those who truly cared for me, I had built a new life, a life full of hope and happiness. Marcus was a distant memory, a shadow of a life I had left behind. I had emerged stronger, braver, and with a newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life. As I served my first customers, I knew that this was just the beginning, a new chapter, filled with the promise of new adventures, new dreams, and endless possibilities. In the quiet of my small apartment, the world seemed to stand still as I stared at Ethan, my husband of 2 years. He lounged on our worn-out sofa, a picture of entitlement, his eyes greedily fixed on the bank statement I had just dropped on the coffee table. His lips curled into a smirk, the kind that always made my stomach churn. "You've hit the jackpot, Emily," he said, his voice dripping with a mix of sarcasm and excitement. $10 million? Can you even count that high?" His words stung, but I held my ground. "It's my father's money, Ethan. He left it to me, not us." Ethan laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the bare walls. "Come on, Emily. We're married. What's yours is mine, right?" I remembered the day I met Ethan at a mutual friend's party. He was charming, confident, and everything I thought I wanted. But that charm quickly revealed itself to be a mask for his controlling and manipulative nature. As I stood there, A deep sense of injustice boiled inside me. This was the inheritance from my father, a man who had worked tirelessly to provide for me after my mother's passing. It was meant for my security, not for Ethan's whims. Your father was a smart man, Ethan continued, flipping through the statement as if it were a catalog for his desires. With this money, we can finally live the life I deserve. Imagine the cars, the vacations. Oh, and we mustn't forget my parents. Like they'll expect their share. His words were like a slap in the face. Ethan's parents had always looked down on me, never missing a chance to remind me of my lesser upbringing. And now, Ethan wanted to shower them with my inheritance. This isn't a shopping spree, I said firmly. I need to think about how to use this responsibly. Ethan's expression darkened. Listen, Emily, you're my wife. You'll do as I say. Or are you forgetting the vows you made? His threat hung in the air, a reminder of the countless times he had used our marriage as leverage against me. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer the timid girl who had fallen for his charm. I haven't forgotten my vows, Ethan, but I also remember my father's teachings about dignity and self-respect. Ethan scoffed. Sentiments don't pay the bills, Emily. Be practical. We can use this money to elevate ourselves. I knew then that this was a turning point. My father's legacy was not just in the form of money, but in the values he had instilled in me. Values that Ethan clearly did not share. I need time to think, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Ethan leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Fine, but remember, Emily, I'm your husband. In the end, you'll do what's best for us. As I retreated to our bedroom, closing the door behind me, I knew one thing for certain. Things were about to change. I wouldn't let Ethan control me or my father's legacy. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. As I lay in bed that night, the events of the day replayed in my mind, each memory sharpening the resolve that had begun to take root within me. Ethan's words, dripping with greed and entitlement, echoed endlessly, clashing with the values my father had taught me. I realized that the man I married was a far cry from the man I thought he was. I remembered the early days with Ethan, filled with laughter and promises. He was different back then, or perhaps that was just what I wanted to believe. We met at a small cafe, introduced by mutual friends. His confidence was alluring, and his interest in me seemed genuine. But as our relationship progressed, his true nature began to surface. The charming man I fell for became possessive, his words increasingly laced with criticism and control. It wasn't just Ethan. His parents, with their archaic views and constant belittling, made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. A wife's place is to support her husband, his mother would often say, her words cutting through me like a knife. They never saw me as an equal, just a means to an end for their son. Lying there in the darkness, I thought about my father. A self-made man, he had built a modest yet successful business from the ground up. He was always fair, always teaching me the importance of hard work and integrity. When my mother passed away, he became both my parents, guiding me with a gentle hand. His sudden death had left a void in my life, and now his legacy was in my hands. I had always admired my father's tenacity and his ability to make tough decisions. He often said, "In life, Emily, you must stand up for what you believe in, no matter the odds." Those words resonated with me now more than ever. Ethan, with his manipulative ways, was the antithesis of everything my father stood for. As the night wore on, my resolve solidified. Ethan saw my inheritance as his ticket to a lavish lifestyle, but I saw it as a responsibility, a testament to my father's life and his trust in me. It was clear that Ethan and I were on diverging paths, and I could no longer ignore the glaring truth. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound clarity. I needed to take control of my life and my inheritance. It was time to break free from Ethan's hold and honor my father's memory, not just with the money he left me, but by living the values he had instilled in me. As I prepared for the day, I made a silent vow to myself. I would no longer be the passive wife, bending to Ethan's will. I would stand up for myself and make decisions that reflected my beliefs, not his. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the lessons my father had taught me. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the breakfast table where Ethan sat, buried in his phone. As I brewed coffee in the kitchen, the familiar sense of unease crept over me. I braced myself for the conversation that I knew was inevitable. "Ethan," I began, my voice steady, "we need to talk about the inheritance." Without looking up, he replied, "Sure, Emily. I've been thinking about it too. We could start by upgrading this place, maybe even move to a nicer neighborhood." His words hit me like a wave of cold water. It was clear that Ethan saw the inheritance as a windfall for his own desires, ignoring my feelings and the significance of the money. "That's not what I had in mind," I said, sitting across from him. "This money is a responsibility. I want to use it in a way that honors my father's memory." Ethan finally looked up, his expression a mix of amusement and irritation. "Honor your father, Emily? He's gone. This is about us now. You're thinking too small." His dismissive tone ignited a fire within me. "It's not about thinking small, Ethan. It's about making choices that are right, not just extravagant." Ethan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I'm your husband, Emily. You should be thinking about our future together. Don't be selfish." Selfish? The accusation stung, but I held my ground. Wanting to use my father's money wisely isn't selfish. It's what he would have wanted. Ethan scoffed, standing up abruptly. "Fine, have it your way. But remember, I'm part of this too. We'll see how long you can hold on to your ideals." As he stormed out, I felt a mixture of anger and relief. The conversation had only reinforced my belief that Ethan and I were fundamentally different. His idea of a future was one of luxury and indulgence. Mine was of stability and purpose. Over the next few days, the tension in our apartment grew. Ethan became increasingly hostile, his comments more cutting. But with each passing day, my resolve grew stronger. I started to plan my next steps, researching financial advisors and investment opportunities that aligned with my values. One evening, as I sat poring over documents, Ethan's voice cut through the silence. "You're wasting your time, Emily. You could be enjoying life, but instead you're acting like an old miser." I looked up, meeting his gaze. "This isn't a waste of time, Ethan. It's about making informed decisions." Ethan shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips. "You'll regret this, Emily. When you're alone with your precious morals and your money, you'll realize you made a mistake." His words were meant to hurt, but they only strengthened my determination. I was no longer the woman who needed Ethan's approval. I was my father's daughter, and I would honor his legacy in a way that was true to myself. Days turned into weeks, and the chasm between Ethan and me widened with every passing moment. His attempts to control how I used the inheritance became more blatant, his demeanor more aggressive. But with each attempt, my resolve to break free from his grasp only strengthened. One evening, as I returned from a meeting with a financial advisor, I found Ethan waiting for me, a storm brewing in his eyes. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice cold and accusing. "I was seeing a financial advisor, planning for the future," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Planning for a future without me, no doubt. You think you're so clever, don't you, Emily?" His words were a dagger to my heart, but I refused to show my pain. "It's not about excluding you, Ethan. It's about making responsible choices." Ethan stepped closer, his anger palpable. "I am your husband, Emily. Your choices should include me. But you've decided to play the independent woman, haven't you?" I met his gaze, my own anger rising. "Yes, I am independent, Ethan. I don't need your permission to make decisions about my life or my father's inheritance." The air between us crackled with tension. Ethan's face twisted into a mask of fury. "You'll regret this, Emily. You think you can just walk away from me, from our marriage?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "This isn't about walking away from our marriage. It's about standing up for myself, something you've never respected." Ethan's next words were venomous. "You're nothing without me, Emily. You think you can manage all this money on your own? You're deluding yourself." His attempt to belittle me only fueled my determination. "I am not deluding myself, Ethan. I know exactly what I'm doing." Ethan stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the apartment, a symbolic end to the conversation, and, perhaps, to more than that. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. Ethan's words, though hurtful, had ignited a fire within me. It was clear that our marriage was no longer a partnership, but a battleground. I thought about the strong, independent woman my father had raised me to be. He had always encouraged me to make my own decisions, to stand up for what I believed in. It was time for me to honor his teachings, to take control of my life and my future. The next morning, I made a decision. I would not let Ethan's threats and manipulation dictate my actions any longer. I was going to reclaim my independence, my dignity, and my father's legacy. It was a daunting path, but I was ready to walk it. The first step was to distance myself from Ethan and his toxic influence. I needed space to think, to plan, and most importantly, to breathe. I started to make arrangements to move out, to find a place where I could start anew. A place where I could be myself, free from Ethan's shadow. It was a bold move, but it was necessary. I was no longer the timid girl who had fallen for his charm. I was Emily Roberts, and I was ready to fight for my future. The decision to leave Ethan was both terrifying and liberating. For years, his presence had loomed over me, shaping my decisions, my thoughts, even my sense of self. But as I packed my belongings, each item I placed into boxes felt like a step towards reclaiming my identity. I had found a small apartment not too far from where I worked. It was modest but filled with light, and most importantly, it was mine. The lease was signed quietly, my new sanctuary away from the turmoil of my married life. On the day I planned to leave, I waited for Ethan to go to work. The apartment felt eerily silent, each room echoing with memories of arguments and lost dreams. As I moved through the space, collecting the last of my things, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I left a note for Ethan on the kitchen table. It was brief, explaining that I needed time and space to think, to understand what I wanted from my life. I didn't know how he would react, but I no longer wanted to be held captive by the fear of his response. The drive to my new apartment was a blur. My mind was racing with what the future held, with the enormity of the step I had just taken. But as I unlocked the door to my new home, a sense of peace washed over me. This was more than a physical space. It was a symbol of my newfound independence. The following days were a mix of emotions. I busied myself with setting up my new place, creating a space that reflected who I was, not who Ethan wanted me to be. The freedom was exhilarating, but the reality of my situation also began to sink in. I was starting over, and though it was what I wanted, it was also daunting. Ethan's reaction to my departure was as I had feared. He bombarded me with calls and messages, fluctuating between anger, pleading, and even moments of seeming understanding. But I held firm, politely but firmly asking for space. In my solitude, I began to plan for my future. I met with my financial advisor more frequently, discussing investment strategies and ways to use my inheritance responsibly. The conversations were empowering, reminding me that I was capable of making sound decisions on my own. But as I forged my new path, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Ethan was unpredictable, and I knew he wouldn't let go easily. The threat of his reaction loomed over me, a dark cloud on the horizon of my newfound freedom. One evening, as I sat in my living room surrounded by boxes and half-unpacked belongings, a knock on my door jolted me from my thoughts. My heart raced as I approached, a sense of dread settling in. Standing there in the dimly lit hallway was Ethan. His face was a mix of anger and desperation, a sight that once would have sent me into a spiral of fear. But as I stood there facing him, something within me had changed. I was no longer the woman he had controlled and belittled. I was Emily Roberts, strong and determined, ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, his voice edged with a demand. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Ethan, I've asked for space. Please respect that." His jaw clenched, his eyes searching mine for a sign of the submission he was used to. But he wouldn't find it, not anymore. "Ethan, please leave. I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk." As I closed the door, sealing the space between us, I knew the road ahead would be challenging. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. In the weeks that followed my departure, the world seemed to shift on its axis. I navigated my new life with a sense of purpose, fueled by the determination to live on my terms. The freedom was intoxicating, yet the shadow of Ethan's presence lingered, a reminder of the life I had left behind. Ethan's attempts to reach me became more frantic. His messages oscillated between apologies, threats, and pleas for reconciliation. But with each word, the man I once thought I knew unraveled further, revealing the depth of his manipulative nature. I found solace in my work and in the slow process of building my new life. The apartment became a sanctuary, a place where I could breathe, think, and dream without the weight of Ethan's expectations. Then, one day, as I was leaving for work, I received a call that would change everything. It was from a mutual friend, someone who had witnessed the evolution of my relationship with Ethan from the beginning. "Emily, have you heard about Ethan?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "No, what happened?" "He's lost his job. After you left, he fell apart. He's been making scenes at work, lashing out. They had no choice." The news hit me like a wave. Despite everything, a part of me ached for the man Ethan once was, or the man I believed him to be. But another part, the stronger, more resilient part, knew this was the consequence of his actions, a result of the choices he had made. As the days turned into weeks, more news trickled in. Ethan had become a recluse, avoiding friends and family. His once charming facade had crumbled, leaving behind a man consumed by his own bitterness and regrets. The transformation was stark, a harsh reminder of how far he had strayed from the person I had once loved. His downfall, while self-inflicted, was a tragic testament to the destructive power of greed and manipulation. In the midst of this, I found strength in the legacy my father had left me. The inheritance, once a point of contention, became a symbol of my journey towards self-reliance. I invested wisely, focusing on sustainable and ethical ventures that aligned with my values. But more than the financial security, it was the emotional and psychological freedom that truly marked my new beginning. I had stepped out of Ethan's shadow, emerging stronger, more confident, and more grounded in who I was and what I stood for. As I moved forward, the lessons of my past became the guiding light for my future. I embraced each day with gratitude, knowing that the struggles I had endured were not in vain. They had led me to this moment, to a life lived on my own terms, true to myself and to the values my father had instilled in me. Ethan's downfall was not my victory. It was a somber reminder of the path I had chosen not to take. My victory lay in the peace I had found, in the life I was building, and in the promise of a future filled with hope and possibilities. Months had passed since I stepped out of the shadow of my old life, and with each day, the past seemed more like a distant memory. My new life in my modest apartment was filled with small joys and achievements, each marking a step further away from the turmoil that once consumed me. I had established a routine that brought me comfort and a sense of purpose. Mornings were spent at my job, where I found fulfillment in my work. Evenings were reserved for exploring my interests and hobbies, activities I had long neglected in the shadow of Ethan's overpowering presence. As I settled into this new rhythm, I discovered parts of myself that had been buried under years of suppression. I found a passion for painting, a hobby that allowed me to express my emotions and experiences in vibrant colors and bold strokes. Each canvas was a testament to my journey, a reflection of the pain, the growth, and the healing. Friends and colleagues noticed the change in me. Gone was the timid, unsure woman they once knew. In her place stood someone who exuded confidence and contentment. Their support and encouragement were constant reminders of the strength that comes from being surrounded by positivity and understanding. One afternoon, as I walked home from the grocery store, I found myself passing by the park where Ethan and I had often spent lazy Sundays. The memories came flooding back, but they no longer held the same power over me. I could look back at those moments and recognize them for what they were, stepping stones on my path to self-discovery. As I sat on a bench, watching families and couples enjoying the sunny day, my thoughts turned to my father. I wished he could see me now, see how his teachings had guided me through the darkest of times. In my heart, I knew he was with me, his wisdom and love a guiding light. The inheritance, which had once been a source of conflict, had become a foundation for my future. I had invested wisely, ensuring financial stability for myself. But more than the monetary value, it was the emotional inheritance from my father that I treasured most, the lessons of integrity, kindness, and resilience. In the quiet of the evening, as I sat in my living room, surrounded by my paintings and the comforts of my new life, I realized how far I had come. The journey had not been easy, but it was worth every step. I had emerged from the ashes of my old life, stronger and more assured of who I was. I no longer defined myself by my relationship with Ethan or by the events of the past. I was Emily Roberts, a woman who had faced adversity and emerged victorious, not because I had defeated someone else, but because I had discovered and embraced my true self. As I looked towards the future, I did so with optimism and a sense of peace. There were still many chapters to be written in my life, but for the first time, I felt excited and ready for whatever lay ahead. I had found my place in the world, a place where I could be me, unapologetically and wholeheartedly. And in that realization lay my greatest triumph. This room gets such nice sunlight, doesn't it? Perfect for a home office, right? Michael said, his voice tinged with excitement. Yeah, and it even faces the garden. Lovely, I replied, trying to match his enthusiasm. We were touring a newly built house with Michael's mother, Ellen. The real estate agent, Sarah Thompson, led us through the elegantly designed spaces, pointing out each feature with practiced ease. It had been 3 years since Michael and I got married. We had saved diligently for a home of our own, and today we were checking out several houses for sale near the station. Michael and Ellen seemed particularly taken with this property's modern design and spacious layout. Please feel free to check out the second floor as well, Sarah suggested, gesturing towards the staircase. As we started to head upstairs, Sarah gently grabbed my arm. Can I have a word with you in private? She asked, her tone suddenly serious. Puzzled, I followed her outside, leaving Michael and Ellen to continue their tour. Sarah took a deep breath before speaking. I'll get straight to the point, she began, her eyes locking onto mine. Your husband, he's having an affair. I felt the ground shift beneath me. What are you talking about? I managed to utter, disbelief coursing through me. Sarah's expression was solemn. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but he was here just a few days ago with another woman. They were looking at houses, talking about starting a new life together. The shock was like a physical blow, leaving me reeling. The sound of my shattered trust seemed to echo loudly in the silence that followed. I can help you gather evidence if you need it, Sarah offered, her voice softening. I nodded, barely processing her words. Thank you, I said mechanically. I need some time to think. Returning inside, I found Michael and Ellen discussing the kitchen layout, their voices filled with excitement. I felt like an outsider, watching a play where I no longer knew my part. That evening, as we drove home, Michael chatted happily about the house, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I remained silent, lost in my thoughts, planning my next move. I knew one thing for certain: I would not let this betrayal go unpunished. Michael and his mistress would soon learn that I was not a woman to be trifled with. The next few days passed in a blur. I played the role of the dutiful wife, smiling and nodding at the right moments, all the while a tempest of betrayal and anger raged inside me. My interactions with Michael were carefully measured, a mask of normalcy hiding my true feelings. I reflected on our marriage, once a source of comfort, now a well of deception. We met at work, two professionals climbing the corporate ladder. Our relationship was born from mutual respect and a shared desire for a child-free life. It was a partnership, or so I had thought. Michael, what do you think about inviting your mother over for dinner this weekend? I asked one evening, keeping my tone light. She seemed really excited about the house. Great idea, Elena, he responded, not looking up from his phone. She's been really supportive lately, especially with the house hunting. Ellen, his mother, had always been a thorn in my side. Her intrusiveness was suffocating, yet Michael was blind to it. I recalled her words at our first meeting. At your age, not even planning to have kids? Her judgmental tone still echoed in my ears. The dinner was an exercise in restraint. Ellen's criticisms of my cooking, thinly veiled as suggestions, were more frequent than usual. Elena, dear, you really should try to learn some of my recipes. A way to a man's heart is through his stomach, after all. I'll keep that in mind, Ellen, I replied, forcing a smile. Michael was oblivious, laughing and chatting with his mother as if we were one big happy family. His ignorance to my discomfort only fueled my resolve for revenge. After dinner, while Ellen prattled on about the virtues of motherhood, I excused myself, citing a headache. In the solitude of our bedroom, the full weight of my situation hit me. The man I had trusted, the life I had built, it was all a lie. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. My thoughts were interrupted by Michael's snoring beside me. I turned to look at him, his face peaceful in sleep. The sight of him filled me with a mixture of sadness and disgust. The following day, I contacted Sarah Thompson. "I'm ready to start gathering evidence," I said, my voice steady. "Good," she replied. "I'll help you in any way I can." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of empowerment for the first time since that fateful day at the house viewing. Michael and Ellen had underestimated me. They would soon learn the cost of their deceit. The incessant chime of the doorbell jolted me from my thoughts. It was Ellen, predictably early for her unsolicited daily visit. Her presence in our home had become a constant, smothering intrusion. "Good morning, Alina. I brought some ingredients. Thought I'd give you a cooking lesson today," she announced cheerfully, marching into the kitchen. "I had plans today, Ellen," I said, striving to keep my voice calm. "Nonsense. A wife's place is in the home, especially when there's so much to learn," she chortled, dismissing my words. As Ellen prattled on, I felt a surge of resentment. This woman, who had been a thorn in my side since day one, was now an accomplice in her son's betrayal. The hypocrisy of her traditional values while she sheltered a cheating son was infuriating. Later that evening, I confronted Michael. "Your mother's daily visits are suffocating me. Can't you see that?" Michael shrugged, indifferent. "She's lonely since the separation from Dad. It's no big deal, Elena." "No big deal? It's our life she's meddling with," I retorted, my frustration boiling over. "Relax, Elena. She's just trying to be helpful. You could learn a thing or two from her," he replied nonchalantly, turning back to his laptop. His dismissive attitude was the last straw. I knew then that my plan for revenge couldn't be mere retribution. It needed to be a lesson, a punishment fitting for their deceit and arrogance. The next day I met with Sarah again. "I need solid evidence of the affair, something irrefutable," I told her, my resolve steeling. Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of my request. "I'll do what I can. This isn't just about a house anymore, is it?" "No," I replied, my voice cold. "It's about justice." As the days passed, the charade of normalcy continued. Ellen's visits became more overbearing, and Michael's detachment more apparent. The house they were so excited about now felt like a symbol of my entrapment. One evening, I overheard Michael on the phone, his voice hushed but excited. "I can't wait for us to start our new life together," he whispered. The confirmation of his infidelity was a knife to my heart, but it also fueled my determination. I would no longer be the silent, accommodating wife. They would soon learn that underestimating Elena Martin was their gravest mistake. The days were tinged with a cold, seething anger, hidden beneath a veneer of routine. Every smile, every conversation with Michael felt like a performance, and with each passing day, the mask grew heavier. Sarah Thompson called me one afternoon with a tone of urgency. "Elena, I've got something. Can you meet me?" At a quiet cafe, Sarah slid an envelope across the table. Pictures of Michael and her, and their conversations about the house. It's all there. I braced myself as I sifted through the photos and transcripts. There he was, my husband, with a woman half my age, looking at houses, planning a future. My heart raced with a mix of sorrow and rage. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "This is more than enough." Returning home, I found Michael in the living room, absorbed in his phone. "Another long day at work?" I asked, masking the bitterness in my voice. "Yeah, just catching up on some emails," he replied without looking up. I sat across from him, the evidence burning a hole in my bag. "Michael, there's something we need to discuss about the house." He finally looked up, interest piqued. "What about it?" "I was thinking maybe we should reconsider our options. You know, make sure it's the right choice for us," I ventured, watching his reaction closely. He frowned slightly. "I thought we agreed on that house. It's perfect for us." "For us, or for you and your plans?" The words hung in the air, a challenge left unspoken. Michael's expression faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "What are you implying, Elena?" "Nothing," I replied, my voice calm. "Just thinking out loud." The conversation shifted to mundane matters, but the air was thick with unspoken truths. That night I lay awake, the images of Michael and his mistress etched into my mind. The pain of betrayal was sharp, but it paled in comparison to the burning desire for retribution. The next morning, Ellen arrived with her usual pomp. "Elena, you look tired. You should take better care of yourself. For Michael's sake." Her words were like a poison, each syllable laced with hypocrisy. "I'm fine, Ellen, just a lot on my mind with the house and all," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. As she busied herself in the kitchen, her presence felt more invasive than ever. She was not just an overbearing mother-in-law, she was an accomplice in her son's deceit. I made a decision then. My revenge would not be a simple confrontation. It would be a reckoning. Michael and Ellen would pay for their betrayal, not just with their relationship, but with everything they held dear. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The final act was about to begin. My days were now consumed with meticulous planning. Every move, every word was calculated for the impending showdown. The evidence Sarah had provided was safely hidden, a secret weapon waiting to be unleashed at the right moment. Ellen's visits had become intolerable. Each day she brought with her a wave of condescension and interference, thinly veiled as maternal concern. "Elena, you really should start thinking about having children. Time isn't on your side, you know," she would often say, a smug smile playing on her lips. I bit back my retorts, knowing that soon enough her smugness would crumble under the weight of her son's deceit. One evening, as I prepared dinner, Michael's phone buzzed incessantly on the counter. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at the screen. Messages from her, the other woman, filled the screen with affectionate emojis and plans for their next meeting. A cold fury settled in my chest. How could he be so careless, so utterly disrespectful to our marriage? The facade of our relationship had become a grotesque parody. The following day, I met with a lawyer, outlining my situation and presenting the evidence. "I want to make sure that when I strike, it's decisive and final," I told him. The lawyer, a seasoned professional in marital disputes, nodded in understanding. "We can file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. With this evidence, you have a strong case for a favorable settlement." "Good," I replied, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. "I want him to pay for what he's done, not just legally, but personally." Meanwhile, Michael continued his charade, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. His casual indifference to our marriage only fueled my determination. I started to plant seeds of doubt in Ellen's mind about Michael's fidelity. "He's been working late a lot lately. Do you think it's just work?" I asked her one day, feigning concern. Ellen laughed it off. "Michael is a dedicated worker, Elena. He's doing it for your future together. You should be grateful." Her blind trust in her son was almost pitiable. She had no idea that the pedestal she had placed him on was about to crumble. As the day of confrontation drew nearer, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. I was about to shatter the life I had known, but in its place I would build something new, something free from lies and deceit. Michael and Ellen were about to learn a harsh lesson in betrayal and consequences. The storm was ready to break, and I was its harbinger. The day had finally arrived, the day of confrontation and revelation. I had everything planned down to the last detail. The evidence was ready, and my resolve was ironclad. Today, Michael and Ellen would face the consequences of their actions. In the morning, I acted as if it were any other day, concealing the storm raging within me. Michael left for work with a casual goodbye, unaware that his world was about to shatter. Midday, I received a text from Sarah. "It's today. They're meeting at the house this afternoon." My heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. This was it, the moment of truth. I arrived at the house ahead of time, the property now a symbol of betrayal. Hidden from view, I watched as Michael and his mistress arrived, laughing and holding hands. The sight of them together ignited a fierce anger within me. I waited, biding my time until Ellen arrived. As expected, she came, beaming with pride and excitement, oblivious to the deceit around her. It was time to unveil the charade. Stepping out from my hiding spot, I confronted them. "Hello, Michael. And you must be the woman he's been cheating with." Michael's face drained of color, shock and fear replacing his usual confidence. His mistress looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise and guilt. "Ellen, did you know about this? About your son's affair?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tumultuous emotions inside. Ellen stared at me, then at Michael, disbelief etched on her face. "What? No, that can't be. Michael!" I didn't wait for his response. I pulled out the photos and messages, evidence of their sordid affair, and handed them to Ellen. See for yourself. The air was thick with tension as Ellen rifled through the evidence, her expression turning from confusion to horror. Michael, how could you? She stammered, tears welling in her eyes. Michael tried to speak, to explain, but his words were a jumble of excuses and lies. His mistress, now realizing the gravity of the situation, began to back away, only to be stopped by my cold words. Don't think you're innocent in all this. You're as much to blame. Turning to Michael, I let out all the pent-up anger and betrayal. I trusted you, loved you, and this is how you repay me? With lies and deceit? Ellen, sobbing, looked at me, then at her son. I raised you better than this, Michael. How could you do this to us? In that moment, I saw the family facade crumble, the perfect image Ellen had of her son shattered by his own doing. This marriage is over, Michael. I'll see you in court, I declared, my voice unwavering. As I walked away from the house, leaving Michael to face the wrath of his mother and the reality of his actions, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The storm had broken, and I was finally free from the lies that had bound me. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. My lawyer was efficient, ensuring the divorce proceedings were swift and decidedly in my favor. The evidence of Michael's infidelity left him with little ground to stand on. Throughout it all, Ellen remained a shattered figure. Her once overbearing demeanor had been replaced by a quiet, almost meek presence. She tried to reach out to me, her voice laced with regret. Elena, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I met her apologies with a cool detachment. It's too late for sorry, Ellen. You chose to turn a blind eye to your son's actions. Now you must live with the consequences. The settlement was more than generous. I secured a significant portion of our shared assets and a sizable alimony. As for Michael, the revelation of his affair had not only cost him his marriage, but his reputation as well. His career took a nosedive as whispers of his indiscretions spread through our professional circles. On the day the divorce was finalized, I felt an immense sense of liberation. I was no longer bound to a man who had so callously betrayed my trust. I was free to start anew on my own terms. I decided to move out of the city, away from the memories and the people who had been part of my former life. As I packed up my belongings, I came across a photo of Michael and me in happier times. A bitter smile crossed my lips as I tossed it into the trash. That chapter of my life was over. In my new home, a quaint house in a quiet town far from the hustle and bustle of the city, I found peace. The pain and anger that had once consumed me had faded, leaving room for new beginnings. Ellen reached out occasionally, her messages filled with remorse and a desperate hope for reconciliation. I never responded. Some wounds were too deep to heal, some betrayals too great to forgive. Michael, too, tried to contact me, his messages a mix of apologies and pleas for understanding. I deleted them without a second thought. He was a part of a past I had left behind. In the end, justice had been served. Michael and Ellen had learned a harsh lesson in the consequences of deceit and betrayal. And I, Elena Martin, had emerged from the ashes of my broken marriage, stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I knew that this was just the beginning. A new chapter in my life was about to start, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited for what the future held. Lena, a child isn't a pawn for your games. Choose now, us or your past life. My husband's accusatory words cut through me like a knife. I stared at him in stunned silence, struggling to process the ultimatum he had just delivered. After 10 years of marriage, I never imagined Dean and I would end up here, locked in a vicious battle with his overbearing parents over the future of our daughter. What are you saying? I finally managed. Dean's face was hard. I'm saying you need to get your priorities straight. My parents have me as best interests at heart. You're the one putting your selfish desires first. That's not fair. I shot back. All I want is for Mia to have options, to pursue her own dreams. Your parents want to control her, mold her into what they think she should be. I won't let my daughter's spirit be crushed like that. Dean laughed derisively. So now my parents are monsters? They've given Mia love and stability her whole life. You're the one who fills her head with nonsense about careers and travel and God knows what else. Encouraging her independence is not nonsense, I retorted. She deserves to make her own choices. Well, right now, she's choosing to listen to my parents over you. That should tell you something. I flinched, the words hitting their mark. Ever since Dean's parents moved in with us 2 months ago, they had been working to undermine me with Mia, whispering criticisms about my parenting, my career, my dreams, all in an attempt to mold me into the meek, subservient woman they expected a wife and mother to be. I wouldn't bend to their will, but their poisonous words were taking root in Mia's mind. Lately, she had become distant, defiant even. I was losing her. Mia is just a child, I said evenly. Your parents are manipulating her. Can't you see what they're doing? Dean shook his head angrily. You're imagining things. All I see are my parents generously helping us, only to be repaid with ingratitude and resentment from you. I stared at my husband, this man I once thought I knew entirely. When did we become strangers? I'm not choosing between you and them, I said quietly. The only one I'm fighting for is Mia. Dean's eyes flashed. No, you don't get to make this just about our daughter. This is about you and your selfishness. His voice rose. Ever since you started your little baking business, you've changed. Become ambitious, independent. My parents see it too. I bristled, anger flaring in my chest. My business is to set a good example for Mia, to show her she can have her own dreams. Well, it stops now, Dean snapped. You will respect my parents' authority in our home, or you will remove yourself from it. The words landed like physical blows. Dean was delivering his parents' ultimatum. After a decade together, he had chosen their side, separating himself utterly from the woman he had once sworn to cherish. In that moment, something broke irreparably between us. But I was not broken. A strange calm settled over me as I faced my husband's steely gaze. I will not be driven out of my own home, I said steadily. If you want me gone, you'll have to drag me out yourself. I held Dean's stare, seeing uncertainty creep into his anger. My defiance had caught him off guard. Finally, he looked away. I'm going to the office to let you cool down. We'll discuss this later. He turned and left without another glance at me. I listened as the front door slammed shut behind him. Alone now, I allowed the panic and hurt to crush in. But I pushed them down, focusing instead on the fierce resolve building within me. I would not be controlled. I would fight for my daughter and our freedom, no matter the cost. Justice would be done in the end. I was sure of it. I was clearing up after dinner when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Moments later, an expensive sedan pulled up the driveway, delivering the last 2 people I wanted to see. My in-laws had arrived, unannounced as usual. I steeled myself as Eleanor and Gerald made their way into the house, not bothering to knock. Oh, good, you haven't started on the dishes yet, Eleanor said by way of greeting. I'll take over. You always leave spots. I bit my tongue as she ushered me away from the sink. 1 fight a day was my limit. Where's our darling granddaughter? Gerald asked, glancing around. She's at a friend's house, I replied tightly. Again? That girl is never home anymore. Eleanor tutted as she aggressively scrubbed a plate. All this gallivanting around is why she's become so insolent lately. Mark my words. I didn't respond, refusing to take the bait. I knew Eleanor was provoking me, trying to get a reaction. She wanted an excuse to criticize my parenting. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Just then Dean arrived home from work. I felt a twinge of unease, unsure what to expect after our blowout this morning. Mom, Dad, what a nice surprise, he said warmly, embracing his parents. He didn't so much as glance in my direction, so this was how it would be. Dinner was a predictably unpleasant affair. Gerald dominated the conversation, lecturing me on how Mia's willfulness was a direct result of my lax parenting. That child has no discipline, no moral grounding, he remarked disdainfully between bites of pot roast. But what can you expect when her own mother traipses around pursuing selfish interests instead of focusing on her duties at home? Yes, it's shameful, Eleanor agreed. A mother should devote herself fully to her family, not waste time on frivolous hobbies. Their pointed words made my face burn, but I held my tongue. Arguing would only delight them. Dean, of course, remained silent. I fought down the anger rising within me. After dinner, I retreated to fold laundry while Dean took his parents out onto the back patio. I could hear their muffled voices through the open window as I matched socks with trembling hands. You need to get control of your wife, Gerald was saying. She refuses to accept her rightful role, and it's poisoning your daughter against tradition. Eleanor chimed in. That poor girl doesn't stand a chance if Lena keeps filling her head with this feminism nonsense. Their words turned my simmering anger into fury. I could tolerate personal attacks, but I would not let them disparage me to my own daughter. I was done being compliant. It was time to fight back. I abandoned the laundry and marched out to the patio, interrupting their conspiring. 3 heads swiveled in my direction. How dare you, I seethed. You come into my home uninvited and insult me to my face, but I will not stand by while you tell lies about me to my daughter. Dean looked uncomfortable. Lena, let's not do this again, he muttered. Ignoring him, I stepped closer to my in-laws. If you have something to say about my parenting, you will say it to my face, not behind my back. Mia is my daughter, not yours. Gerald's mouth twisted angrily. You are out of line. We will not be spoken to with such disrespect. Eleanor gave me a disgusted look. And you wonder why the girl doesn't obey you. Look at the example you're setting. I shook with rage. Get out, I spat. You are no longer welcome here. For a suspended moment, everything was still. Then Gerald rose menacingly. You'll regret this insult, he said. Then he stormed away, Eleanor rushing after him. Dean watched helplessly as his parents drove off in a huff. Then he turned to me, his eyes unreadable. For better or worse, the gauntlet had been thrown down. My skirmish with the in-laws was now open warfare. I had chosen my ground. Now I could only hope I was ready for the fight ahead. Over the next few weeks, the tension in our home became unbearable. My in-laws continued their campaign against me, while Dean stood idly by. Eleanor critiqued my every move, from my cooking to my clothing choices. Are you sure that blouse is appropriate for a married mother? She clucked. Gerald's favorite weapon was wielding authority over Mia. He countermanded my instructions to her, encouraged her defiance, and even tried to introduce her to prospective private schools without my knowledge. Through it all, Dean remained silent, refusing to intervene. I felt utterly alone. One evening, Eleanor arrived to babysit while Dean and I attended a work function. When we returned, I found her in Mia's room, going through her clothes. Some of these outfits are unsuitable, she declared, holding up a cute sundress. Little girls shouldn't bear so much skin. I'm getting rid of the inappropriate ones. You will do no such thing, I said angrily. Those are Mia's clothes that I bought for her. You have no right. Eleanor's lips thinned. I have every right to ensure my granddaughter dresses appropriately. If you won't do it, I will. We argued heatedly until Dean stepped in. Mom, let's just all take a breath. I'm sure we can work this out reasonably. There is nothing reasonable about this, I fumed. Your mother is trying to control our daughter, and you're letting it happen. I stared furiously at my husband until he looked away, cowed. Seething, I grabbed the clothes from Eleanor. Get out of my daughter's room, I demanded. You've overstepped your bounds for the last time. A week later, I hosted a family dinner that went disastrously awry. Gerald made several crude jokes about my baking hobby. Women don't need careers. The kitchen should be the only place they work. I was about to unleash on him when Mia spoke up first. Grandpa, stop being mean to Mom. She loves baking, and her treats make people happy. Don't be insolent, child, Gerald snapped. You should learn respect, not mimic your mother's foolish notions. Don't speak to her that way, I intervened. My daughter has a right to her own opinions. Gerald's face purpled with rage. In my day, wives and children knew their place. It's time this family returned to tradition before the rot spreads further. He pointed his fork at me threateningly. Either you start obeying as a wife should, or you can remove yourself from this household altogether. I sat perfectly still, fury freezing me in place. How dare this man try to banish me from my own home and family? The rest of the meal passed in unbearable silence. Afterwards, I pulled Dean aside. This has to stop, I implored him. Your parents are destroying our family. Whose side are you on? Dean ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm not taking sides. I just want peace. His spinelessness infuriated me. There can be no peace while your parents are holding our family hostage. Don't exaggerate, Dean chided. They only want what's best for us. I stared at him in disbelief. When had he become so blind? It was obvious I was on my own here. Fine, I thought resolutely. If it was a battle they wanted, I would bring the fight to them. The time had come to take action. I was through being passive. My in-laws had underestimated me for the last time. I would expose them for the manipulative snakes they were. One way or another, I would take back control of my family. Justice would be done. Did you hear about Lena? That poor man, saddled with such a negligent wife. My friend Rita's words made me freeze. We were at our weekly coffee catch-up when she suddenly changed the subject to gossip about me. What are you talking about? I asked carefully. Rita leaned in, savoring the dramatic moment. Word is you left your daughter home alone for hours while you were out gallivanting. Poor thing wandered the streets looking for you. I stared at her in shock. It was a complete fabrication. I would never leave Mia alone like that. Immediately, I suspected my meddling in-laws were behind the rumor. It was exactly the kind of lie they would spread to discredit me as a mother. I quickly excused myself from Rita and rushed home, incensed. When I walked into the kitchen, I found Eleanor chatting on the phone. She avoided my gaze as she quickly ended the call. Who was that? I demanded. Just a friend, she said breezily. I stepped forward furiously. Was it another person you were telling lies about me to? Eleanor scoffed. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, I said through gritted teeth. You told people I abandoned my daughter. How could you stoop so low? Eleanor lifted her chin defiantly. I did no such thing. But if you were more focused on your maternal duties instead of yourself, we wouldn't need to have this conversation. I trembled with rage. How dare you turn your vile behavior around on me? You have no right to slander me to cover up your own shameful meddling. Just then, Dean walked in, drawn by the commotion. What's going on here? He questioned. Your mother is spreading vicious lies about me, I responded heatedly. She told people I neglected Mia. Dean frowned and turned to his mother. Mom, is this true? Of course not, Eleanor huffed. Lena has become paranoid. I was simply chatting with an old friend. I could see Dean's hesitation as he weighed our statements. Dean, please listen to me, I implored. She is trying to undermine me with these false rumors. You must see that. Dean shook his head tiredly. I don't know what the truth is, but you should try to understand how your actions might be misinterpreted by others. His equivocation enraged me further. Even presented with Eleanor's deceit, he refused to take my side. You know she's lying, I cried. How can you not defend your own wife? Enough, Dean snapped. I won't have you disrespect my mother this way. Perhaps we all need some distance right now. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with Eleanor once more. Her smug expression made me want to scream. That night, I lay in bed fuming, unable to sleep. Dean's lack of support was the ultimate betrayal. If he refused to stand up to his parents' manipulation, I would have to play their games better than they could. A plan started taking shape in my mind. I would gather irrefutable proof of their misdeeds. I had avoided open confrontation before, but desperate times called for decisive action. The time had come to go on the offensive. My in-laws had cast the first stone, attempting to sully my reputation. Now they would reap the consequences of provoking a mother's fury. The next day, I went out and purchased a small hidden camera. I would be ready to catch them in their deceit. Let them revel in their petty gossip for now, I thought bitterly. Their downfall was coming. I would see to it myself. Justice would be served. Over the next few weeks, I gathered damning evidence against my in-laws. My hidden camera captured their most vicious attacks. One afternoon, Eleanor cornered Mia in the kitchen. Why are you dressed like that? She demanded, eyeing Mia's stylish outfit. Young ladies should dress modestly. Your mother is letting you parade around like a harlot. When Mia defended her clothing choice, Eleanor snapped, Do not argue with me, child. You need discipline, not lip. Later, I caught Gerald rifling through my personal documents. A man should know his wife's business, he remarked when confronted. I'm sure you have nothing to hide from family. The final straw came after Dean was unexpectedly called away on a work trip. Eleanor and Gerald pounced on the opportunity to attack me unchecked. Off on another trip while his wife is left alone, Eleanor tutted loudly to Gerald. Doesn't set a good example for his daughter, does it? No surprise the child is becoming unruly without proper leadership at home, Gerald replied. I seethed silently as they carried on maligning my character and fitness as a mother. When Dean finally returned, I urgently pulled him aside to play the recordings. Your parents crossed a line, I told him. Just listen and you'll see. But Dean refused to even put on the headphones. Invading their privacy will just make things worse, he argued. We fought bitterly as I struggled to make him understand the truth. But as usual, he remained infuriatingly passive. That night I lay in bed unable to sleep, Eleanor's vile words echoing in my mind. Suddenly I realized I had been going about this all wrong. Dean would never stand up to his parents. His loyalty to them blinded him to their toxicity. If I wanted to protect Mia from their poisonous influence, I would need to take drastic action. The next morning I called a lawyer. She reviewed my recordings and agreed I had grounds for legal action. With this evidence, we can file for full custody of your daughter, she said. I assume that's your priority? Yes, I affirmed. Securing Mia's future was all that mattered now. Then we'll need to move quickly, she advised. I recommend filing divorce proceedings right away. It will give us the advantage. Her words sent a jolt through me. After 10 years of marriage, I had never envisioned it ending this way, but I thought of Mia, and my resolve hardened. I would burn the whole house down if that's what it took to free her from my in-laws' grip. Just tell me what I need to do, I told the lawyer. Later, I picked Mia up from school myself, wanting to seize a quiet moment alone with her. As she chattered away in the back seat, excitement lit up her face in a way I hadn't seen for too long. Looking at her glowing smile, I knew I was making the right choice. She was the only thing that mattered. That night I cooked Mia's favorite meal, and we laughed over shared memories. I tucked her into bed with extra hugs and kisses. Tomorrow the battle would begin in earnest. But tonight I held my daughter close, cherishing the simple joy of being together before our lives were irrevocably changed. For her sake, I would stay strong. I was ready to fight with ruthless courage to secure the peaceful, happy future she deserved. My in-laws had underestimated me, but that would be their downfall. They were about to see what a mother's fury could do. The next day, my lawyer set the wheels in motion. The fight for my daughter had begun. Justice was coming for my in-laws, and I would be its instrument. The day I exposed my in-laws' duplicity was one I will never forget. Dean stared at me in dismay as I laid out my case against his parents. When I played the recordings of their vicious attacks, he went pale. "How could you do this?" he asked dully when the clips ended. I clenched my fists. "How could I not? Your parents have been poisoning our home for months. I warned you, but you chose to ignore it." Dean passed a trembling hand over his face. I had no idea they'd said such horrible things to you." His ignorance fueled my anger, because it was easier to assume I was overreacting than confront the uncomfortable truth. Dean looked shaken. "You're right, I should have listened to you more, but we can work this out reasonably." I cut him off sharply. "No, the time for reason is over." I slapped the divorce papers down on the table. Dean gaped at them in disbelief. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said quietly. "But your parents' influence is toxic. I have to get Mia away from them." Just then, Eleanor and Gerald arrived, summoned for an urgent family meeting. Their smug faces soured when they saw the divorce papers. "What is the meaning of this?" Gerald blustered. I rose and went to the TV. "This." Their shocked protests filled the room as I played the recordings of their slander and manipulation. Dean watched, hollow-eyed, as the evidence of his parents' malice unfolded. When the videos ended, you could hear a pin drop in the deafening silence. Gerald's face was purple with rage as he turned on me. "How dare you smear us with such lies?" I crossed my arms defiantly. "They are your words. I have shown my husband the truth. Your reign in this house is over." Gerald advanced toward me, but Dean stepped forward. "No, Dad, she's right. I should have seen your toxicity sooner." His voice broke. "Please just go." Eleanor shrieked. "We are your family. You would choose this woman over your own parents?" When Dean just looked at the floor, his mother became hysterical. "She has poisoned you against us." As Gerald led the sobbing Eleanor out, he turned to spew one final threat at me. "You'll regret this betrayal," he snarled. "We will see you ruined for it." Their departure left an unbearable silence hanging over the room. Finally, I turned to Dean. "I'm sorry you had to face that," I said gently, "but it was the only way to break their hold on our family." Dean stared at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I just don't understand where everything went so wrong." My heart ached for his pain, even after everything. Their manipulation was subtle, but the time for forgiveness is past. My priority now is my daughter's well-being. Dean looked down at the divorce papers, then back up at me. You would really separate Mia from me forever? I hesitated. Despite his failings, Dean was still her father. Perhaps if he finally understood the truth, we could avoid a bitter custody battle. There was still a chance Mia could have both parents in her life. If you have really seen your parents for what they are, and you're willing to change, then maybe. I began gently. Dean's head snapped up, a light reigniting in his eyes. In the aftermath of my confrontation with Eleanor and Gerald, their downfall was swift and profound. Word of the scandal spread quickly through our tight-knit community. Friends and neighbors, now privy to my in-laws' deceit, shunned them openly. After years of maintaining polished public facades, their reputations were destroyed virtually overnight. I took no joy in seeing them humiliated so completely, but I felt a sense of justice nonetheless. Their toxicity had finally been exposed. Eleanor took the social rejection especially hard. She lashed out wildly, accusing me of fabricating the recordings. But with the truth so undeniably laid bare, no one believed her wild conspiracy theories. Her daily hysterical phone calls to Dean and I soon became too unbearable. We were forced to cut contact, delivering the final blow to her delusions of familial control. "You've destroyed this family," were her parting words to me during her last tirade. "No," I responded evenly. "You destroyed it yourself through your manipulation and lies. I simply shone a light on the truth." With Eleanor and Gerald's malign influence excised from our lives, Dean and I cautiously explored reconciliation. Our relationship was forever changed, but we both wanted to avoid the upheaval of divorce for Mia's sake. Dean seemed humbled by the revelations about his parents. "I thought they acted out of love," he confessed, "but now I see their behavior was rooted in something darker." I knew how profoundly difficult it was for him to accept their toxicity after a lifetime of devotion. His willingness to change gave me hope. Perhaps with time and effort, we could rebuild our family on a stronger foundation. Of course, Eleanor and Gerald's shadow still loomed over us. Enraged by their public disgrace, they immediately pursued legal action to regain access to Mia. But with irrefutable evidence against them, their efforts failed completely. The judge upheld the restraining order, keeping them firmly out of our lives. Their desperate last-ditch attempt to salvage control had backfired spectacularly. They had shown their true colors plainly in the courtroom, cementing their defeat. In the weeks following the trial, a profound quiet settled over our home. Mia seemed lighter, freed from the dark cloud her grandparents' presence had cast. She and I spent long days baking, laughing, and dreaming together again. Dean was still healing, but he invested himself fully in repairing his bond with Mia. Their long walks and heartfelt talks became a new evening ritual. Watching my daughter smile again was the greatest balm to my soul. The long nightmare was finally over. My family was coming back to life. Of course, I knew Eleanor and Gerald's toxicity would leave lasting scars. But the roots of their bitterness ran too deep for me to untangle. Their own dysfunctions had condemned them long before I came into the picture. In the end, I had simply stood up for myself and my daughter. There was nothing to regret in that, nothing to forgive myself for. Justice had been served, and my conscience was clear. Our lives were irrevocably changed. But as I watched Mia laugh joyfully while Dean pushed her on the backyard swing, I felt hope bloom anew. The future, now unclouded by my in-laws' darkness, shone bright with promise. 5 years later, our lives had found a new normal. The wounds from my in-laws' toxicity had scarred but healed. Mia was now a thriving teenager. Watching her grow into a confident, compassionate young woman was my proudest achievement. The shadows that had darkened her childhood were lifting. My relationship with Dean would never be the same. Too much hurt and mistrust still lingered, but we now co-parented amicably for Mia's sake. That was enough. My baking business continued to thrive and expand. After years of sacrificing my dreams to avoid rocking the boat, I now pursued my passions boldly. I had found my voice. Our home was now filled with laughter and light. I treasured the family gatherings with those who had stood by me, My parents, my sisters, my loyal friends. Together we celebrated milestones like Mia's graduation and achievements like the expansion of my bakery. No more walking on eggshells or managing toxic relatives. We were free. Of course, the memories of all we had endured still haunted me. Letting people in was not easy after having my trust shattered so profoundly. When darkness crept in, I would gaze at my daughter's bright smile and remember that it had all been worth it. Her future had justified any sacrifice. My in-laws remained firmly exiled from our lives as they deserved to be. Once or twice they attempted to re-establish contact, but I refused to welcome their toxicity back in. During one phone call, Eleanor broke down begging for access to Mia. "Haven't we suffered enough for one mistake?" she implored. But I remained resolute. The damage was too deep to risk exposing my daughter again. Their bitterness was an incurable disease. Quarantine was essential. Dean still struggled sometimes with guilt over cutting off his parents. "Is it right to condemn them forever over this?" he agonized. But even he understood the need to shield Mia. In trying to control her future, they had forfeited any place in it. It was a tragic but necessary severing. Watching Mia blossom freed from their darkness reaffirmed my decision daily. Her joyful spirit was all the absolution I needed. On the anniversary of the day I finally exposed their cruelty, I hosted a celebration for the family members who had become my rock. My parents toasted my courage. My sisters rejoiced in our unburdened sisterhood. Dean gave a tender speech praising my protection of Mia. And my daughter, eyes shining with love, presented me with a framed photo of the two of us on her first day of high school. "You gave me the strength to fly," she whispered. Looking around at those who had lifted me up when I had nothing left, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. Out of toxicity and despair, we had built a new life of hope. The past could not be changed, but the future was ours to shape, and I would keep shaping it with faith, courage, and love, no longer a victim, but the author of my family's destiny. I raised my glass high to freedom from the shadows of yesterday and to the light of tomorrow.